case of Nicole Adamando. Christopher Grover and Nicole Adamando met in 2008 when he was 21 and she was 19. They both worked as gymnastics trainers at a fitness center and began dating in 2012. After Nicole became pregnant with their first child, they moved in together in Salt Point, New York. However, they were not in a hurry to get married. Their son Ben was born in 2013, and 2 years later, in 2015, they welcomed their second child, a daughter named Faye. Christopher took great pride in being a father of two. But this seemingly perfect family life changed suddenly. At 2 a.m. on September 28, 2017, near Nicole's house, police officer Richard Sicily spotted a car stopped at a red light. When the light turned green, the car did not move. To get the driver's attention, he honked his horn. What happened next shocked him. The driver was Nicole, and her children were in the back seat. Seeing the police, Nicole got out of the car and told him that something terrible had happened in her apartment. She looked very worried and stressed. He later asked her to take deep breaths and exhale several times to calm down. Nicole reported that her husband, Christopher Grover, was lying on the couch in their apartment. She claimed that he had insulted and threatened her, prompting her to try to escape. Christopher was also in possession of a weapon. In a moment of panic, she grabbed the weapon and aimed it at him. He then threatened her, saying he would harm their children and himself. Desperate, she pleaded with him to let her go, promising to leave without telling anyone. However, he refused, insisting that she lie down next to him. Fearing for her life, she attacked him on the head. He fell back onto the couch and died. She then gathered the children, put them in the car, and drove away until she encountered a police officer at a traffic light. After speaking with the officer, Nicole called her friend Elizabeth and asked her to come over. When Elizabeth arrived, she was blocked from approaching Nicole. In a nearby parking lot, she saw ambulances and police cars rushing to the scene of the incident at Christopher and Nicole's apartment. The police entered the apartment and discovered Christopher lying on the couch with a bullet in his head. A weapon lay on the floor nearby and the rug shifted slightly. The shower was running, and in the bathroom, a broken laptop lay submerged in water. The police took Nicole to the station for questioning. Meanwhile, Christopher's mother, Gail Grover, was informed of the devastating news. She expressed disbelief, saying she had never suspected her son was facing any problems. Christopher was a kind and cheerful person who loved sports, held a black belt in Taekwondo, and worked as a gymnastics coach. One of his students, Bad Wellen, shared that Christopher was always upbeat and full of energy, constantly encouraging his students and never allowing them to feel discouraged. Nicole's friend Elizabeth provided a very different perspective. Elizabeth taught music at the school where Nicole's son, Ben, attended. One day, Elizabeth noticed that Nicole had a black eye. At that time, she was dressed in jeans, a long-sleeved blouse, and a scarf. Throughout the previous summer, she consistently covered herself in thick clothing. Other acquaintances had also observed bruises on her body, but chose not to ask her about them. Nicole often claimed that her injuries occurred during games, attributing them to an accidental hit by a woman from her gym. Concerns about Christopher's behavior were growing. Some people noticed he was becoming increasingly angry with his gymnasts, and there were rumors that he was abusing his wife, Nicole. During police questioning, Nicole claimed that she attacked Christopher in self-defense. She was subsequently arrested and charged with a second-degree crime, which could result in a 20-year prison sentence. A few weeks after the tragedy, Christopher's friends, family, and former students came together to release balloons in his memory. A friend of Nicole's, Elizabeth, had started organizing rallies and fundraisers to support her. Elizabeth shared that in April 2016, Nicole finally confided that Christopher was verbally abusive and that they frequently argued. Nicole explained that they had no issues at the start of their relationship, but after the birth of their son, their conflicts intensified. He began pressuring her to engage in intimate relations more often. On one occasion, Christopher violently pushed Nicole against a doorframe and assaulted her. 2 years later, when she was pregnant again, a similar incident occurred. After that, she sought help at a hospital. The doctor examined her and sent her home. A few days later, while Nicole was preparing breakfast for her son, Christopher entered the kitchen and demanded that she do something for him. Nicole sarcastically replied that she would do it, sir. He got angry and knocked her to the floor. Then he heated a spoon on the gas stove and burned her with it. Nicole sought medical assistance again, and the examination report confirmed that Christopher had burned her in several places with the heated spoon. Nicole said there were times when Christopher tied her up, abused her, and left her lying on the floor for hours. He eventually untied her, leaving her with red marks on her arms and neck. When Nicole confided in her friend Elizabeth about her situation, Elizabeth encouraged her to file charges against Christopher. However, whenever she thought about reporting him to the police, she hesitated, afraid that no one would believe her. Some were worried that taking action might worsen her circumstances. In the summer of 2016, Nicole decided to leave Christopher. She packed her things and took the children to Elizabeth's house. She saw Nicole's car drive by her house many times. Finally, she called Nicole, encouraging her to come in. Nicole agreed, but ultimately did not have the courage to do so and returned home. In the months before Christopher's death, Nicole visited a doctor 3 times who noted several injuries on her body. In May 2017, the doctor noted burns on Nicole's skin. In June 2017, the doctor observed that Nicole's vulva was severely swollen and appeared to be turned inside out. By August 2017, there were more bruises on her body, along with her account of abuse by Christopher. In September 2017, the Protection Service received an anonymous tip to check on a family. Nicole said they had been informed that someone was coming to check the apartment. Concerned, Christopher packed a large bag with items he had used to abuse Nicole. He took this bag with him to work, then returned without it, and in a good mood. That evening, he called Nicole into the bedroom, handed her a weapon, and asked her to load it, holding up a bullet for her to see. Nicole did as he asked, and then went into the bathroom to take a shower. Christopher then entered the bathroom, threw his laptop at her, and asked her to have intimate relations on the couch. They moved from the bathroom to the living room. He was unusually gentle with her while they were intimate. Afterward, as Nicole rested in a chair, she thought Christopher had fallen asleep. Trying to get up quietly, she was startled when he pulled a weapon from under the pillow. In a panic, Nicole grabbed the weapon and aimed it at Christopher. He laughed and mocked her, saying that this would happen. He demanded that she hand the weapon over to him, threatening to kill her, their son, their daughter, and even himself. No one would survive. In response to his threats, Nicole attacked him on the head. In March 2019, Nicole faced trial for the death of her husband, Christopher Grover. Supporters, wearing purple to represent victims of domestic violence, stood by her side. Christopher's mother, Gail, argued that her son could not have harmed Nicole and believed someone was trying to draw attention by lying. She also recalled witnessing her grandson, Ben, hit Nicole with a guitar during a game. The prosecutor's office stated that Nicole was pretending to be a victim and insisted her claims of abuse were false. A forensic expert noted that the weapon was held to Christopher's head when it went off. At the time of his death, his head was resting on a pillow, and the bullet that killed him was found inside the pillow. Therefore, the prosecutor asserted that he was sleeping when Nicole attacked him. However, Nicole's lawyer accused Christopher of damaging the laptop and dunking it in water to erase the evidence. Although the laptop was found in the bathtub and examined, no information was recovered from it. Nicole reported that he had removed the hard drive from the laptop and disposed of it the day before the incident. However, prosecutors believe Nicole may have damaged her laptop to make others think Christopher was trying to hide evidence of a crime. Furthermore, The prosecution claimed that Nicole texted Christopher a few days before his death, in which she criticized him, called him a jerk, and said he was really stupid. They also revealed that 6 weeks before the tragedy, Nicole had messaged a friend, saying that she didn't know how to kill him without getting caught, and she ended the message with a laughing emoji. A lawyer argued that the situation was merely a joke, and that Nicole sent aggressive messages to Christopher for self-protection. Their apartment included a sewing room, where police discovered a video camera on the floor. Nicole alleged that he had thrown the camera down, but prosecutors believed that Nicole placed it there herself to suggest that Christopher was trying to destroy evidence of his abuse. The video camera contained no incriminating evidence. The prosecutor noted that Nicole had experienced trauma at the age of 5, having been abused during a sleepover at a friend's house, which led her to avoid spending the night at others' homes. As an adult, when she met Christopher, she confessed to having difficulties with intimacy. They didn't become physically close until a year into their relationship, during which he was caring and understanding. Prosecutors also argued that Nicole made up her story of abuse to get away from Christopher. She allegedly lied to her friends, doctors, and did not report the incidents to the police. A doctor testified that Nicole claimed she was abused by a worker who was renovating her mother's apartment building about 5 years ago. However, during the trial, a witness admitted she could not clearly remember the incident or identify the perpetrator, whether it was the worker or Christopher. Around the same time, Nicole met a married police officer who offered her a job as a live-in nanny. Christopher was familiar with this officer through work. It was revealed that Nicole had been in a relationship with this officer for several years, both before and after the birth of her son, Ben, and she stated that he also forced her into intimacy. During the trial, Nicole's lawyers presented photographs of injuries she sustained during her time with Christopher, claiming he was responsible for them. However, the prosecutor maintained that the injuries could have been caused by someone else, and it was unclear who had inflicted them. The prosecutor pointed out inconsistencies in the medical records from when Nicole was pregnant for the second time and went to the hospital. When answering many questions, she replied no, denying that Christopher had abused or burned her. The prosecutor argued that Nicole changed her story and returned to the hospital a few days later to assert that Christopher had burned her. The prosecutor argued that Nicole's primary motive was her fear of being exposed during an upcoming inspection by security services at their apartment. She feared they wouldn't find any evidence of abuse, which could lead to accusations of lying and loss of her rights as a mother. In contrast, Nicole's lawyer contended that she acted in self-defense to protect her children and had no other options. During the trial, friends, psychologists, doctors, and nurses testified on Nicole's behalf, expressing their support for her situation. A photo of Nicole clearly shows her injuries, including a large blister on her face and burns on her chest. Other images reveal bite marks on her shoulder blades and neck, which would be impossible for her to inflict on herself. A forensic expert also confirmed that there was no evidence to suggest Christopher was actually asleep at the time of the attack. Nicole spoke in court and maintained her version of the incident. She appeared emotional and anxious while testifying. She described Christopher as a good and kind father and coach, but stated that he behaved very differently in private. She claimed that after the birth of their daughter, he developed an addiction to adult films, watching them frequently and encouraging her to act out scenarios from those videos. She alleged that he recorded and posted other videos online without her consent, in which he insulted her and behaved abusively. However, these videos were not presented at trial. Elizabeth, a friend and music teacher, testified in defense of Nicole. She recalled an incident in 2016 when Nicole confided in her about having a miscarriage. Nicole's clothes were covered in blood, and she didn't want to go to the hospital because she was afraid of Christopher. Elizabeth mentioned a card that Nicole had made for Christopher when she first became pregnant, listing 25 reasons why he would be a wonderful father. The prosecutor argued that if Christopher was truly abusive, Nicole would not have given him such a heartfelt gift. However, Nicole argued that she had created the card before their relationship fell apart. After 14 days of testimony, the jury had to decide whether Nicole was a victim of abuse or a real criminal. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury dismissed Nicole's self-defense claim and found her guilty of second-degree murder. After the verdict, Christopher's mother felt relieved that her son's reputation, which had been unfairly tarnished, had now been restored. In February 2020, Nicole Adamando was sentenced to 19 years in prison. However, the case was not finished. Under the revised New York State Domestic Violence Justice Act, Nicole was entitled to another court appearance to present her claim of domestic violence for the possibility of a reduced sentence. Later, an appeals court decided that Nicole could be considered for a lighter sentence, reducing it to 7.5 years. While incarcerated, Nicole drew a picture of herself with Ben, holding on to hope that she would soon be released and reunited with her son and daughter. Supporters of Nicole continue to raise funds to help with her legal expenses. The case of Jennifer Sabina. Benjamin and Jennifer, both from Wisconsin, didn't meet until many years later. Benjamin served in the U.S. Marine Corps, while Jennifer was a recent addition to the police department. A video recorded 2 years ago features her husband, Benjamin, sharing how they met while he was stationed in Iraq. In February 2005, Benjamin and several fellow Marines were struck by a mortar shell during the war. One Marine lost his life, and several others, including Benjamin, were injured by shrapnel. He sustained serious injuries to his leg near the knee, his left arm, chest, and head. Fortunately, he survived the attack. While receiving treatment in Germany, he kept in touch with Jennifer by writing to her every day. Eventually, Benjamin returned to his home base in California. Throughout that time, he continued to email Jennifer frequently, and their relationship gradually developed. After leaving the army, his muscles began to heal, his kneecap recovered, and he started walking and using his arm again. He was even able to begin running. He moved back to Wisconsin and spent more time with Jennifer, and their love grew deeper. One day, he asked her if she would be happy to spend the rest of her life with him, and she said yes. Benjamin was honorably discharged in 2005. After that, he married Jennifer, and they actively participated in church activities. There, Benjamin worked to overcome the psychological issues he experienced during the war. He also helped others in his church who were going through mental and emotional struggles. On December 24, 2012, Officer Jennifer Sabina was working the night shift. During her duty, she maintained contact with her husband, Benjamin, through text messages. The last message she received was around 3 a.m. At 4:24 a.m., the dispatcher on duty tried to reach her but received no response. Concerned for her safety, a colleague, Stahl, used GPS tracking to locate her police car. He discovered it was likely parked at the Wauwatosa fire station on Underwood Avenue, a common spot for officers to take breaks, grab food, or write reports. Stahl arrived at the scene in under 5 minutes. He found the police car and discovered Jennifer lying on the cold sidewalk in front of the fire station. She had suffered multiple head injuries from a weapon. The investigation into Jennifer's death has been ongoing since her body was found. In her 30s, she worked as a police officer in Wauwatosa for 2 years. She is described as intelligent, energetic, always willing to help, and wants to become a good police officer. State investigators began looking into the crime scene. They found shell casings from 2 different weapons, matching the type of ammunition typically used by the police department in that area. However, Jennifer's service weapon was missing and was not found at the scene. Surveillance cameras in the area were examined for clues about the suspect. Traffic camera footage was also collected to track vehicles entering and leaving the crime scene. Additionally, the snowy ground conditions helped investigators clearly identify tracks leading to and from the scene. If these tracks belonged to the killer, he would be the man Jennifer encountered as she walked out the back door of the fire department. When Benjamin arrived at the Wauwatosa police station that morning, he was promptly questioned about his activities the previous night, which is standard procedure. Benjamin stated that Jennifer left for her night shift around 5:15 p.m. on December 23rd. He did not leave the house until 10 p.m., and the only reason for leaving was to purchase a new video game. After returning home, he did not go out again until the police sergeant called him in the morning, after which he went directly to the station. Benjamin had not received any information about Jennifer over the phone and did not inquire about her condition. However, once at the station and during his questioning by detectives, he eventually asked about her after a few minutes. The police officer faced a difficult task in delivering him the tragic news. After a moment of silence, when Benjamin calmed down, he shared that his wife was the one who supported him a lot in overcoming his post-war trauma. She was his strong support throughout his psychological struggles, always caring and present by his side. The situation was perplexing. The nature of the case suggests this was a personal attack as there was no evidence of a criminal incident or altercation. Everything suggested that it was an ambush targeting her specifically. Jennifer had no enemies, and her colleagues knew it. Detectives then asked about Jennifer's mental state the day before she left for work and requested permission to search their home for any clues related to her murder. Benjamin claimed that he and his wife were very happy, and that the night before she left for work, they had hugged and kissed. Later that day, investigators searched their home with Benjamin's permission. During the examination, they discovered 2 holes with bloodstains on the drywall, showing signs consistent with having been caused by a punch. At that moment, the detectives understood that Benjamin was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder since returning from abroad. They also observed him trying to control his emotions at the police station. Another important discovery at Benjamin's home was a bullet casing. However, no matching bullets were found. Only several corresponding shell casings were present, which raised suspicions. On the same day, Benjamin Sabina was arrested, and his interrogation continued. The investigator pressed him, claiming that something significant had happened that morning, and only he knew the truth. However, he denied any wrongdoing, insisting that his feelings for Jennifer were genuine and that he was not angry with her. He stated that he would never harm her because his love for her was so deep. Furthermore, he stated that if he were present, he would save her and do everything possible to prevent the tragedy from happening on Christmas Day. Detectives from the Wauwatosa Police Department began reviewing video footage from traffic cameras. They concentrated on the area around the fire station at the time of the murder, which occurred at approximately 4 a.m. on December 24. Surveillance footage from the fire station, located east of Benjamin's home, showed a black Toyota with tinted windows heading towards the fire station at 1:35 a.m. Later, at 3:45 a.m., the same black Toyota was seen returning west on Burleigh Street. The timing of this second sighting coincided with the time the car left the scene immediately after the incident, and its route matched the route it would have taken to return to his home. When detectives reviewed the video, they checked the parking lot at the police station and confirmed their suspicions. In the parking lot, they discovered a 2012 black Toyota Prius with dark tinted windows. This was the car Benjamin had parked there before he rushed to the station to ask about his wife. A match between the bullet casings found in his home and CCTV footage led to an official search warrant being issued at his home. During the inspection, agents discovered hair that had been washed down the bathtub drain and noted that the shower curtain had been taken down. A trash can was found in the garage, along with dark clothing hidden in the attic. They also discovered a weapon registered to Jennifer and another weapon in the kitchen. As evidence against Benjamin grew, his demeanor shifted from that of a loving husband to that of a ruthless killer. Eventually, he confessed to the crime. He admitted that he had stalked his wife for several days and waited for her outside a fire station for hours. When he spotted her patrol car, he approached and began to attack her. He claimed that she appeared to reach for his weapon, but he was faster. He pulled out the weapon and killed her again when she tried to stand up. When a detective asked if Jennifer recognized her attacker, Benjamin replied that he didn't think she did. He also admitted to punching her in the face multiple times to ensure she was dead. He then shared his disturbing thoughts, revealing that he had contemplated ending his life. He claimed that his loving wife had told him that if he died, she would do the same. Therefore, he rationalized that killing Jennifer was an act of mercy, believing he was sparing her from the pain of having to take her own life after his death. The investigators did not believe Benjamin's story or his complicated reasoning. They found no evidence to support his claim that the murder was motivated by compassion. However, they admitted that he was very jealous. He was upset about the attention Jennifer received from other men, or at least he thought so. Additionally, Benjamin had a known short temper. Just weeks before her death, Jennifer shared with a co-worker an episode from Benjamin's life that involved post-traumatic stress disorder. She explained that he experienced flashbacks, especially at night, which could lead to aggressive behavior. She felt anxious about working the night shift because it meant her husband would be home alone in a potentially dangerous situation. There was a serious incident when Benjamin pointed a weapon at Jennifer's head while he was having a nightmare. She shared with her colleagues that Benjamin seemed haunted by horrific memories from his time serving in Iraq. His time in Iraq had deeply affected him. He killed 68 people and lost over 50 friends, constantly witnessing the deaths of those close to him. As a Marine, he had been trained to kill, which led to his own internal struggles. During Benjamin's trial, he was brought into court in a wheelchair, handcuffed, and wearing a special vest designed to prevent self-injury. He faced charges of first-degree murder for the death of his wife, Jennifer Sabina. The state of Wisconsin alleges that Benjamin killed his wife out of jealousy. He was jealous of her career, while he himself was unable to continue serving in the military or working in law enforcement due to his injuries. He was also described as possessive and prone to angry outbursts. However, his defense attorney, Michael Steeney, pointed out that he had a troubled military past and had suffered a traumatic brain injury, severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Psychiatrists also noted that Benjamin's condition was one of the worst they had ever seen. Eventually, Benjamin officially changed his plea to not guilty. Although he had previously admitted his guilt, he now cited mental illness and defects, thereby shifting the focus to psychological evaluations of him. The judge appointed a psychiatrist to assess his mental condition. The prosecution needed to show that Benjamin was aware of his actions. He admitted to stalking his wife in the days leading up to her murder, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. Furthermore, he took steps to cover up his tracks, such as showering extensively to remove evidence. He also hid both weapons in his home and spent several hours denying his guilt to the police, initially reacting with shock and anger. As the trial progressed, the evidence against him grew, and it became clear that he was guilty of the premeditated murder of his wife. Proving Benjamin's innocence due to mental illness or defect is challenging. In his case, 2 psychiatrists testified in court, both agreeing that he had mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder. However, they also concluded that he was still capable of understanding right from wrong, and did not find him not guilty by reason of insanity. Therefore, it was clearly established from a medical perspective that Benjamin Sabina was mentally ill, but still conscious of his actions. After 6 months, Benjamin changed his plea and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The plea agreement gave him the opportunity to receive a sentence that would make him eligible for parole. He admitted causing Jennifer's death and intending to kill her, which is a violation of Wisconsin law. Jennifer's family supported the plea bargain and expressed their gratitude for it. During the sentencing, Benjamin's mother read a statement to the court. Reflecting on how her son had changed after returning from war, she shared that the once joyful and playful Benjamin had become consumed by the emotional scars from his experiences. She mentioned that he suffered from severe PTSD, experienced flashbacks, insomnia, hypervigilance, anxiety, and had even attempted to end his life due to the trauma of the deaths he witnessed while serving. She noted that she wore her son's dog tags as a reminder that the son they had sent to war was not the same person who had come home. Jennifer's mother also testified at Benjamin's sentencing hearing. She recounted that after a sleepless night, she received a call from the funeral home on Christmas Day. She had asked to see her daughter, but they told her that her face was so badly damaged that she shouldn't look at her. She was overwhelmed with panic and tears. Then, on December 26th, Benjamin, whom she considered her second son, admitted to killing Jennifer. She forgave him and left his future in the hands of God and the justice system. In Wisconsin, the minimum sentence for first-degree murder is 20 years, while the maximum sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Prosecutor Mark Williams recommended a sentence of 40 to 60 years. In his final statement, Benjamin expressed remorse, saying he did not mean to do this to Jennifer Sabina and that he was sorry for taking her life. He added that if he could trade his life for hers right now, he would do it without hesitation. The judge considered Benjamin's confession and acceptance of responsibility as positive factors. The key issue for the judge was to determine how long Benjamin would have to wait before he could apply for early release. It's important to note that a petition for parole does not guarantee it will be granted. Ultimately, the parole term was set at 35 years. If Benjamin Sabina is ever approved for parole, he will be 65 years old at that time. The story of Jennifer Sabina is a heartbreaking tragedy that reflects the impact of war and the terrible consequences of being unable to control emotions. She dedicated her entire life to the community and always supported her husband. However, it all ended tragically in an act of violence, leaving her family and friends in deep sorrow. The case of Robin Doan. This story takes place on a remote farm in a small town called Pampa in Texas, USA. 10-year-old Robin Doan was the daughter of Michelle Conrad. She lived with Michelle, her stepfather, Brian Conrad, and her older brother Zach. The family owned a farmhouse in the area where Brian successfully managed a farming business. The children were raised in a peaceful rural environment. After divorcing the children's biological father, Michelle met Brian, a kind and pleasant man who quickly formed a strong bond with her children. Life improved for Michelle, and she eventually married Brian. The family had been living happily together for several years. By September 2005, Michelle was 6 months pregnant, and the whole family was eagerly anticipating the arrival of the baby. Brian, in particular, was thrilled at the thought of becoming a father. Meanwhile, Robin, a determined and resourceful 10-year-old, was living the typical life of a schoolgirl. She shared close relationships with her mother, brother, stepfather, and even her biological father, who occasionally visited her. Robin also spent some summers with her biological dad. On the evening of September 30, 2005, Robin went to bed as usual, but was suddenly awakened in the middle of the night. At first, she thought she was trapped in a nightmare when she heard her mother screaming and the explosion. It quickly became clear that this was no dream. Something terrible was happening downstairs. Overcome with fear but driven by curiosity, Robin got out of bed and moved to her bedroom door to listen. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, stopping right outside her room. The door creaked open, and Robin quickly leapt back into her bed, her heart racing. She lay perfectly still, trying to suppress her rising fear. Suddenly, the explosion shattered the silence. 2 bullets narrowly missed her, one passing just inches from her left leg and another near the left arm. The 3rd bullet hit a nearby piece of furniture. In the darkness, the attacker didn't realize they had missed her. They then moved to the next room, where Robin's brother, Zach, was asleep. Moments later, more explosions echoed through the house, followed by a faint, heartbreaking cry from Zach. Then, everything fell eerily silent as the attacker left. Robin was frozen with fear, her body paralyzed. She pretended to be dead, using every ounce of willpower to stay perfectly still, too terrified even to breathe deeply, terrified that the attacker might return, notice her alive. In 2.5 hours of panic, she remained in that state, unable to process what had just happened. When she finally managed to summon the courage to move, there were no signs of the intruder. Summoning her strength, Robin cautiously got up. She grabbed her phone and called 911, though every step and movement was filled with dread that the assailant might still be nearby. Her voice trembling, Robin identified herself as a scared 10-year-old girl seeking help. Through tears, she told the operator she was cold and frightened. Between sobs, she explained that she had heard her mother screaming an explosion, but had been too afraid to leave her room to check on her family. She feared the worst, knowing hours had passed without any sound or sign of life from her loved ones. Robin eventually went to the kitchen and gazed out the window, anxiously waiting for the police to arrive. As soon as she saw the flashing lights of the patrol cars, she rushed outside to meet the officers. The little girl, visibly shaken and distressed, was escorted to one of the patrol cars for her safety. Meanwhile, several officers prepared to investigate the house, anticipating the possibility that the attacker might still be inside and ready to confront them. Inside the house, the police discovered a horrifying crime scene. The entire family had been brutally murdered. Brian had been attacked 3 times, Michelle 6 times, and even the family dog had been attacked twice. Robin's brother Zach was killed in his sleep, and one of the bullets struck him directly in the head. Michelle, who was just 2 months away from giving birth, was also tragically killed, and her unborn baby did not survive. Shell casings found at the scene matched a rifle, which was typically purchased through special orders or produced in limited quantities. Throughout this time, Robin remained in the patrol car, waiting for news about her family. She held onto a thin hope that someone had survived. When an officer returned and confirmed that the perpetrator had fled the scene, Robin felt a brief moment of relief. However, the devastating truth about her family's fate was soon revealed to her. Robin began crying again as she fully grasped that her loved ones had been killed. The police informed her that she needed to go to the station to speak with detectives. However, before leaving, Robin asked the officers to help her feed the animals so she could try to calm herself. During this time, she appeared detached from reality. While feeding her goats in the barn, she spoke as though nothing had happened, reminiscing about how she and her brother had won prizes in a competition. But then, she suddenly broke down again, crying as she grabbed one of the officers by the shoulder and desperately asked when her loved ones would come out of the house. The officer had to gently remind her once more that she was the only survivor of the tragedy. Robin was first taken to a nearby medical center for care. The psychologists were assigned to work with her, but this would take time. Doctors examined Robin and confirmed that she was physically unharmed. As a result, the police brought her to the station both to speak with her and to ensure her safety. Meanwhile, detectives understood they were dealing with a dangerous criminal and needed to act quickly to prevent another attack. Robin cooperated with the detectives and provided information to the best of her ability. However, Robin did not witness the events firsthand. Detectives initially suspected that her stepfather or mother might have had a serious conflict with someone shortly before the incident, but this theory was ruled out. Robin denied any such conflicts. Another possibility emerged, that someone in her family might have been involved with dangerous individuals or illegal substances. But Robin dismissed this as well. She couldn't think of anyone who might hate her family enough to attack them with a weapon. Although she described what she heard in great detail, she couldn't identify the attacker. She hadn't gotten a clear look, only catching a glimpse of a dark silhouette. As a result, she was unable to provide any useful description. The only thing she was certain of was that the attacker had light skin. One critical piece of information did stand out. Robin distinctly remembered hearing 15 explosions and confidently reported this number. She later revised her statement slightly, noting that there were clearly more than 10 explosions. When the crime scene was examined, investigators found shell casings confirming that exactly 15 explosions were fired. It seemed surprising that a 10-year-old girl, especially under such terrifying circumstances, could recall this detail so accurately. The situation remained unclear. No motive for the attack had been established, nor had the perpetrator's intentions. It was possible the attacker wanted to eliminate everyone in the household and leave no loose ends. There was even a risk that they might return to target Robin, the sole witness, to complete their plan. For Robin's safety, she will be placed in a specialized center for victims of violence. There, Robin was under the care of her biological father, stepmother, and stepsister, with police officers also stationed at the facility. Now, her father was the only person able to support and help her. He arrived in the middle of the night to pick Robin up, and after her interrogation was completed, they were immediately escorted to the center. Robin was informed that these precautions were necessary for her protection, and she was not allowed to leave the facility. She understood this, as she also herself feared another attack. Despite the restriction on leaving, Robin had to attend her family's funeral. She was allowed to go, but only under police escort. The funeral drew a large crowd from the nearby town, as many people knew the family and spoke about them fondly. In this small agricultural town in Texas, everyone was deeply saddened by the tragedy. For Robin and the mourners, the sight of the 3 coffins at the memorial was unbearable. No one could have imagined that these kind people could die so tragically. Detectives saw the funeral as an opportunity. The time and location of the service were not kept secret. In fact, the police hoped the attacker might show up. If the perpetrator planned to strike again, the funeral would have been the perfect moment. Law enforcement was fully prepared to act, closely monitoring the crowd while keeping a watchful eye on Robin, who was accompanied by her father, stepmother, and stepsister. But the event passed without any suspicious activity. By this point, forensic experts had finished examining the crime scene. They uncovered evidence that might assist in identifying the perpetrator, but no solid leads pointed directly to the murderer. Still, the findings were notable. Inside the house, they found shoe prints, and outside, near the house, they discovered tire tracks. The experts collected all the prints and carefully analyzed the tire tread patterns. Unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA belonging to the attacker were recovered. The lack of fingerprints led investigators to believe the attacker had worn gloves. The only blood found at the scene was that of the victims, suggesting the perpetrator was uninjured. It seemed the family was caught off guard and had no opportunity to resist or fight back. The back door of the house had been forced open, indicating a break-in. However, despite the presence of valuable items, including a wallet with cash, nothing was stolen from the home. Detectives determined that robbery was not the motive behind the attack. The assailant's behavior didn't match that of someone acting impulsively or under the influence of banned substances or alcohol. Instead, the killer acted with intention and precision. methodically eliminating the family members one by one. The police thoroughly investigated of Brian, Michelle, and Zach, but found no suspicions. No one had a motive, and everyone appeared to be kind, peaceful, and conflict-averse. Robin's biological father had been with his family in a nearby town, and his wife confirmed he was home asleep that night. Eventually, all leads came to a standstill, as no one in the family's circle seemed to fit the profile of a suspect. However, such a violent act targeting both adults and children suggested the possibility of a strong motive, such as jealousy, revenge, or resentment. The day before Robin's family was murdered, in the small town of Pineville, Missouri, relatives of the McCool family have attempted to contact them without success. By evening, worried relatives had arrived at the McCool family home. To their shock, the house was empty and surrounded by police tape. A neighbor informed them that a terrible crime had occurred. The night before, Orly McCool and Dawn McCool were killed by an unidentified attacker. At that time, forensic investigators were still processing the scene. They also questioned the relatives who arrived, but no one could provide any helpful information about a possible suspect. Inside the house, investigators found some unusual shell casings of an uncommon caliber, rare and difficult to obtain in the U.S. The following day, another incident in the same area provided a key lead. A local resident, Mr. King, returned to his home after being away for several days on a work trip. He discovered that his house had been broken into, his weapon safes had been forced open and emptied. Among the stolen items was a rare firearm in the U.S. along with ammunition. This strongly suggested a connection between the burglary and the murder of the McCool family. The assailant had likely stolen the weapon from King before committing the crime. Mr. King was thoroughly investigated, but he had a solid alibi. He was out of town at the time of the attack. However, several members of his family could have had access to the weapon. Among them, one person stood out: Levi King, the son of King. Levi was on the run, and family members suspected he was connected to the McCool murders. Thanks to Mr. King's report, detectives had a photo of the suspected killer. At just 20 years old, Levi was already well known to authorities due to his criminal history, which included serving time for burglary. A few years earlier, Levi had broken into a neighbor's house, stolen valuables, and set the property on fire. For this crime, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Just weeks earlier, Levi had been scheduled for transfer to another correctional facility. Desperate for freedom, he escaped during the transfer. Authorities in Missouri were certain Levi was extremely dangerous, armed, and ready to use his weapons at any time. Citizens were alerted through the media, and people were advised not to approach Levi if they encountered him, but to immediately contact law enforcement. Meanwhile, relatives of the McCool family reported several items stolen, including their Dodge Dakota pickup truck. The truck's details were entered into a police database, and a warrant was issued for Levi King's arrest in connection with the crime at the McCool residence. Although Levi King did not know any of the victims personally, he was on the run and needed resources, particularly a vehicle, to leave the state. Eventually, a suspicious young man was stopped by Border Patrol in El Paso, Texas, near the Mexican border, likely attempting to flee the country. During the stop, the young man calmly admitted to having a weapon in his trunk. This led to a more detailed search. During the investigation, they discovered that the pickup truck he was driving was the McCool family's stolen vehicle. Levi was taken to the police station for further investigation. Law enforcement officers decided to question Levi further, and from the start, his behavior seemed odd. Within just 15 minutes of talking to detectives, Levi confessed to the double murder of Orly and Dawn McCool. Levi admitted he couldn't explain why he committed the murders. He said he broke into a random house on the outskirts of town to steal a car, driven only by an overwhelming and uncontrollable desire to kill. When Levi entered the house, he was unexpectedly noticed. A door opened and a woman appeared, politely asking what he wanted. Levi claimed he was startled and panicked, so he grabbed his weapon and attacked her. Hearing the noise, a man came to investigate, and Levi, paralyzed by fear, also attacked him. After the killings, Levi fled in the pickup truck. Levi was soon extradited to Missouri, where local law enforcement questioned him further. During the interrogation, Levi once again confessed to the murders. Levi made an even more shocking confession. He admitted to murdering the Robin family in Texas. His confession matched evidence from the crime scene of the Robin family's triple murder, including matching shell casings found at both crime scenes. Levi described how he had attacked defenseless members of the Robin family, and upon hearing noises upstairs, discovered others in the house. Among them was Robin, who awoke to the explosion. Driven by uncontrollable bloodlust, the killer showed no regard for the victims' ages. Levi went upstairs, entered the bedrooms, and attacked the occupants in their beds to eliminate any witnesses. After committing these horrific acts, Levi fled the scene. After Levi confessed to the crimes, the police quickly contacted their colleagues in Texas to verify the details he had provided. Once again, his account aligned with the evidence. With this confirmation, Robin was finally able to feel some relief. She had been under immense stress for days, unable to sleep. The next day, investigators from Texas arrived to take Levi into custody. During the transfer, showing no remorse, Levi openly described his emotional state before, during, and after the murders. He admitted that the feelings he experienced during the murders were more intense and pleasurable than any banned substance. Even hours after committing the killings, he claimed he could still smell gunpowder, which gave him a sense of euphoria. In a formal video-recorded statement, he detailed his actions, starting with the murder of the McCool family. Levi explained that his urge to kill coincided with his need for a vehicle to escape toward the Mexican border. Along the way, he felt another uncontrollable desire to kill and randomly chose the isolated home of the Robin family as his next target. Levi admitted that he did not know any of his victims, including the McCools or the Robins. Realizing the severity of his crimes, he understood he was now facing the death penalty. In an attempt to avoid this, he fled toward Mexico, hoping to disappear. In Missouri, Levi was charged with the double murder of the McCool family. Following his lawyer's advice, he accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. At the same time, hearings for the triple murder and attempted murder in Texas were approaching. Unlike in Missouri, Texas prosecutors took a firmer stance, refusing to rule out the death penalty or consider any plea agreements from the defense. The prosecutor was confident in securing a conviction that would ensure Levi could no longer pose a threat to society. However, death penalty cases often involve lengthy trials and require extensive preparation. Levi spent several years in jail without bail while awaiting trial in Texas. By the time the trial began, Robin, the sole survivor of the Texas attack, was over 14 years old. The hearings took place just before her birthday. On the eve of her 15th birthday, Robin was furious as she realized how senseless and brutal Levi's attack on her family had been. He had no motive and acted purely out of a desire to kill. Understandably, she strongly advocated for him to receive the death penalty. However, Levi's lawyer fought to save his client from execution. Opinions were divided. Some believed Levi did not deserve to live, while others argued that life imprisonment without parole was a harsher and more fitting punishment for his crimes. The defense attorney sought to present Levi King as a more sympathetic figure to influence the jury's decision. He emphasized that Levi had struggled with bipolar disorder since adolescence. Over the years, he had also been diagnosed with depression, psychosis, and schizophrenia. Levi was one of 7 children in a family where he reportedly received little to no love or care. His antisocial behavior was linked to an abusive, alcoholic father and a neglectful, indifferent mother. From as early as elementary school, Levi engaged in troubling acts, including arson, substance abuse, and killing animals for amusement. These behaviors seem to reflect the dysfunctional environment he grew up in. Levi's abusive father was the first to frequently harm him and expose him to alcohol and banned substances. When police visited Levi's home, they were shocked by what they found. One wall was covered with ceremonial knives, swords, and weapons. Strangely, despite often struggling to afford food, Levi always managed to buy ammunition and weapons. Levi's obsession with violence contradicted the defense's claim that he was a good person, shaped by an adverse childhood and environment. The prosecution painted a different picture, portraying Levi King as a predator waiting for his chance to strike. They described him as someone who took pleasure in the smell of blood and gunpowder. The prosecution's main witness was Robin, the sole survivor of Levi's attack. The trial was a deeply traumatic experience for her. She was determined to confront the man who had destroyed her family. Up until that moment, she had been filled with anger and wished for his death. Later, Robin shared her story with journalists. She explained that when she first looked into Levi's eyes in court, she was struck by how empty and cold he seemed. As she saw his lifeless eyes, she forgave him. Robin realized it was pointless to waste energy on someone so devoid of humanity. She understood that Levi could not have become any other kind of person. After about 8 hours of deliberation, the jury decided that the death penalty was too harsh for someone as mentally handicapped as he was. They sentenced Levi to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Levi was eventually extradited to Missouri to serve his life sentence there. For a long time after the attack on her family, Robin struggled with severe psychological trauma. She frequently had nightmares, couldn't sleep well, and was unable to go outside alone. Even years later, the effects of her trauma would resurface. However, thanks to the support of her loved ones, she was able to overcome them. The case of Robin Doan raises many questions about the influence of psychology and deviant behavior. Gaming addiction and the use of high doses of antidepressants may be closely related to a number of factors that cause the psychology of people facing stress or psychological disorders to become unstable, leading to violent behavior. The case of Emily Murray. Emily Murray is a college student. She was born on February 19, 1980, in Sleepy Hollow, New York. Emily lives with her parents and 3 siblings, 2 sisters and a brother. They are very close and are in constant contact with each other. Emily's father works as the director of a science center. Thanks to his job, her family lives comfortably and can afford everything they need. Emily is a gifted student with a great passion for science, especially medicine and philosophy. In addition, she is a devout Christian, like her family. Since she was a child, she has helped her parents and found ways to earn money. But she often donates what she earns to charity, leaving very little for herself. After graduating from high school, Emily enrolled in Kenyon College to continue her studies. She focuses on philosophy and hopes to work for the church and participate in various missionary activities. During this time, she also traveled to Italy, New Zealand, and Japan, with each trip related to her church charity work. In 2000, Emily entered her 3rd year of college, where she studied hard and got closer to her dream. She was actively involved in church activities and participated in youth ministry. She also envisioned a large family, imagining herself with her future husband and their children. Tragically, no one expected her life to end so suddenly. On November 3, 2000, at the college Emily attended, her roommates woke up to find that she had disappeared. The girls remembered that Emily could sometimes get caught up in her work, as there were times when she stayed late to finish an important project with a friend. Emily had worked a shift at a restaurant the night before, leading to speculation that she might have stayed late and then gone straight to college to study. Her roommates, therefore, continued their normal routine, going to work and continuing their studies, expecting to see Emily later. However, she did not return that night, and they became increasingly concerned when she failed to show up at the planned party. A few days earlier, Emily had gone to the local supermarket and bought all the necessary items, indicating that she intended to attend. Emily's friends were worried and contacted Emily's sister to check if Emily had returned to her family. However, Emily's sister said that she had not returned home either. Her sister called her parents to report that Emily was missing. It had been nearly 24 hours since Emily had gone missing, and her parents were distraught when they learned of the situation. Despite their efforts, Emily's friends were unable to find any useful information. Just a few hours after her sister's call, Emily's parents got in their car and drove to her school. At that time, a group of volunteers, including dozens of students, had searched the area for Emily, but found no trace. It was also confirmed that Emily's car was missing along with her. Emily's parents went to the university security office to report their daughter's disappearance. However, they were disappointed to find that the staff did not care. The staff assumed she was just out for the night and said that their daughter would be back soon. The family believed that this was not Emily's normal behavior, as she always informed them of her plans. Not a day went by without her contacting family and friends. Now, she was unusually quiet and ignored all attempts to reach her. Emily's roommates accompanied the family to the security office, and all three emphasized that this behavior was unusual for Emily. All of Emily's belongings were still in her room, including her bank checks and a wallet full of documents and cards. This suggested that she had no intention of leaving for a long time. All of her textbooks were also left behind. Finally, the security staff agreed that a search was necessary. They decided to start by thoroughly searching Emily's room. However, they found nothing suspicious. As a result, they created a missing persons notice and began distributing flyers to students on campus. Meanwhile, Emily's family contacted the sheriff's office to report their daughter missing. The police carefully reviewed all the details surrounding Emily's disappearance and checked her room, realizing the seriousness of the situation. They began tracking her down from the evening she went missing. Emily worked at a restaurant near her school. Its proximity to the school and diverse menu made it a popular hangout for students. The restaurant was open until 2 a.m. every night, attracting a large crowd of young people. However, the police quickly realized that the late-night schedule could attract potentially dangerous individuals. Local girls knew that it was unsafe to go to the restaurant alone at night because of the many drunk and rowdy. On November 1, Emily was working her last shift at the establishment. She was well liked by everyone for her positive attitude and friendly demeanor. The police compiled a list of everyone present, as these people were likely the last witnesses to see Emily. They could provide information for the search or report any suspicious activity that night. The restaurant closed at 2 a.m., as usual. Most of the customers had left, but Emily and a few other employees stayed behind to finish their work and clean up. Among the employees was Emily's friend, a waitress, who worked with her at the restaurant. Emily's time card showed that she finished her shift at 3:07 a.m. and left the restaurant. This was confirmed by Gregory McKnight, a chef who had left earlier that night as scheduled by the staff. The staff working in the store said that at around 3 a.m., they all finished their work and started to go home. Emily's parents were frustrated by the slow pace of the investigation. Despite the collection of valuable evidence suggesting many leads to follow, some believed that Emily might have left on her own. When the police inquired about her mental health, they discovered that although she had been depressed in recent years, she did not have any serious mental health issues. This depression may have been related to her heavy responsibilities at school and work, as well as her recent breakup with her boyfriend, which further affected Emily's emotional state. After gathering all the information, the police searched Emily's dorm room. They found notes from her that contained some contradictory statements, leading them to question whether she might have taken her own life due to her depression. Emily could have made such a decision because of her mental condition. However, her family and friends dismissed this idea. They explained that during her bouts of depression, she behaved quite differently. Specifically, during those difficult times, she would cut off contact with her family and become very withdrawn, and this withdrawal increased over time. But now, things were different. Before her disappearance, she showed no signs of distress. She was still sociable, full of energy, and maintained relationships with others. In fact, she seemed fine and felt inspired by her work. The police spoke to Emily's friends, who confirmed that she had been doing well recently. She was no longer troubled by her breakup with her ex-boyfriend and had even stopped taking the antidepressants prescribed by her doctor. Her life had improved, and she felt no need to continue the medication. During the investigation, the police found no useful information or leads. They decided to contact the FBI for assistance. The police suspected that if Emily had been kidnapped, she might have been taken across state lines. But this investigation also yielded no results. The police then spoke with Emily's ex-boyfriend. Friends described their relationship as loving, but often filled with conflict. Eventually, the couple realized they were not compatible and decided to break up. The police discovered that her ex had attended a party on the night of her disappearance. Multiple witnesses confirmed that he and Emily had been seen together. He was one of the last people to leave the restaurant in the early morning, along with other partygoers. While he may have watched over Emily's friend, there was no evidence that he intended to harm her. Throughout the evening, he spent time with Emily as a friend. During police questioning, her ex provided a verified alibi. He had left with friends and traveled to another city, quickly eliminating him from the suspect list. The police then focused on Emily's co-workers at the restaurant. Several employees noted that one co-worker had feelings for Emily and wanted to pursue a relationship with her, but she had rejected him. He was summoned to the police station for questioning, where he denied any wrongdoing, insisting that he was only friends with Emily. He mentioned that they had talked a lot the night before she went missing, as he rarely saw her compared to the other employees. Before leaving the restaurant at 11 p.m., he wished Emily well and rushed to a concert for which he had tickets. His alibi was confirmed, and he was no longer considered a suspect. The next suspect was Dave. Several girls reported that he had difficulty communicating with women. He often tried to pursue a relationship with a coworker but was rude, making many people feel uncomfortable. Dave was eventually fired from the restaurant because of his aggressive behavior. The restaurant manager, Gregory McKnight, mentioned that he had heard about Dave making inappropriate comments to other employees. Gregory found Dave's behavior suspicious and reported it to the police, thinking it might be related to Emily's disappearance. However, witnesses stated that no one had seen Dave at the restaurant the night Emily went missing. Due to his suspicious behavior, the police decided to continue investigating him. They suspected that he may have been following Emily, possibly waiting for her after her shift while hiding on the street. He was taken to the police station for questioning, where he provided an alibi that was corroborated by several witnesses, leading to his removal from the suspect list. The investigation was then suspended due to a lack of solid evidence, as all avenues of investigation had proven fruitless. Each suspect had a credible alibi. Police believe that Emily may have either escaped or taken her own life. However, they require more evidence to support this theory. In the meantime, some of Emily's close friends disagree with these possibilities. As time went on, days passed without any sign of Emily. The university campus was covered with missing person flyers featuring her picture. While everyone believed she was missing, the police realized that the crucial 48-hour window to find her alive had passed. However, the investigation was still ongoing. The family did not receive any demands from the kidnappers. There were no calls or ransom demands, so the possibility of her being kidnapped was dismissed. Due to the uncertain safety conditions at the school, students were asked to walk in pairs. To address the dangerous situation, security forces were assigned to accompany students on campus. For Emily's family, this was the most difficult period, filled with constant fear and anxiety. Her parents could not eat or sleep. They desperately searched for information about their daughter's whereabouts, but all their efforts were unsuccessful. An important discovery redirected the investigation. A month before Emily went missing, Ronald had a minor traffic accident. After the accident, the other driver got out of the car to check the damage and assist Ronald. During this time, Ronald discovered that the driver who caused the accident had several guns in the trunk of his car, which had been opened by the collision. Concerned, Ronald decided to call the police and report the incident. 2 months passed, and on December 9, 2000, officers from the sheriff's office were dispatched to a trailer park. They were supposed to inform the driver of the accident from October that he was being charged with complicity in a burglary. Thanks to Ronald's testimony, they were able to solve a series of crimes. The officers went to the address where the car's owner was registered, but found no one there. The trailer appeared to be abandoned, and next to it, they found several cars in poor condition. However, before leaving, the officers noticed another car behind the man's house that stood out from the others because it was new. The car was checked against the database, and the police discovered that it was a green car that belonged to another vehicle that was also listed as missing. Officers passed this information on to the police investigating Emily's disappearance. The most surprising aspect for the police was the identity of the owner of the trailer where Emily's car was discovered. The trailer belonged to Gregory McKnight, a chef at the restaurant where Emily worked, who had previously tried to blame his co-workers for her disappearance. The police then obtained a search warrant for the trailer. An officer entered through a window and immediately noticed a terrible smell of decay. Inside, they found bloodstains, and upon further investigation, discovered Emily Murray's body wrapped in a rug. An autopsy confirmed that she had died from a gunshot wound to the right side of her head. More than a month had passed since Emily's disappearance, and now the investigation had to inform her family of the tragic outcome. Gregory McKnight, the prime suspect, was quickly arrested and questioned. He answered briefly and vaguely and appeared very guarded, as if he were closely monitoring what he said. When the police informed Gregory that they had discovered a body in a missing car, he stopped cooperating and requested a lawyer. The situation was made easier by the fact that Gregory was already wanted for burglary, which meant he could not evade arrest and could be held while the details of Emily's death were investigated. The trailer was thoroughly examined, revealing bloodstains and a bullet hole in the bodywork, which a forensic scientist identified as the scene of the murder. By this point, there was enough evidence to conclude that Emily had been murdered in Gregory's trailer. The forensic expert would need to provide a detailed report after the autopsy. The investigation continued, and after 2 days, a major discovery was made. Forensic scientists searched the area around the trailer for a murder weapon and decided to examine a nearby well. Instead of finding a murder weapon, they discovered a human skeleton. This skeleton appeared to belong to an older person, probably a male. The identity of this second victim remains unknown. Prior to these events, a young man named Gregory Julios had gone missing in the area. A forensic expert verified this connection. The details of his disappearance match those of Emily's case. He had been reported missing about 6 months earlier in a nearby town. According to his girlfriend, Gregory Julius had left home to attend a college party with a friend named Gregory McKnight. He was the last person known to have seen Gregory Julius alive, and Gregory McKnight was called to the station for questioning. During questioning, Gregory McKnight stated that he did not know where his friend was. At this point, a search was underway for the missing man. He said that he had attended a party with his friend, Gregory Julius. However, he claimed that they had parted ways after the party, and that he had not seen Gregory Julius since then. The police found no evidence that Gregory McKnight was involved in his friend's disappearance, so he was released. Gregory Julius's girlfriend recognized the clothing found on the body as belonging to him, and the medical examiner confirmed the identity of the body as indeed being Gregory Julius. Due to these new developments, Gregory McKnight was questioned again. He gave brief answers, carefully choosing his words, and avoided providing any substantial information. The police suspected that he was lying and hiding something, apparently trying to buy time. However, the police had strong evidence against him, as they discovered not only a body but also several bags of Gregory Julius's belongings in his trailer. Gregory McKnight was born into a dysfunctional family and grew up in Quincy, New York. At the age of 15, he was convicted of murdering a resident during a robbery and was sent to a juvenile detention facility. After his release, he married his wife, a former employee of the correctional facility where he had been held. The couple initially lived in his wife's mother's house before purchasing a trailer in Ray, Ohio. His wife said she suspected he was involved in Emily's kidnapping because he had become anxious and exhibited unusual behavior after Emily's disappearance. Despite her concerns, she tried to hold on to hope that her husband was not involved in the case. With this information, the police began to suspect that they were dealing with a dangerous killer. The prosecution collected all the items taken from Gregory McKnight's home, specifically a shovel, pruning shears, an axe, and a hunting knife. These items were sent for testing and found to have traces of Gregory Julius's DNA on them. The prosecutor sought the death penalty for Emily's murder. However, the judge ruled that the county, being the poorest and least populous in the state, could not afford a death penalty trial and could not guarantee that Gregory McKnight would receive a fair trial. As a result, the case was moved to another county, causing administrative delays. The trial did not begin until 2002. During the trial, multiple witnesses testified that Gregory McKnight had secret romantic feelings for Emily, suggesting that he may have been obsessed with her, although he appeared to have suppressed those feelings. Gregory McKnight often defended Emily when other boys bothered her. Generally, he seemed to be a friendly person. The restaurant's bartender mentioned that after Emily went missing, Gregory McKnight told him that he felt she was dead. Other co-workers noted that Gregory McKnight was seen leaving with Emily that night. The prosecution argued that Gregory McKnight knew it was Emily's last shift at the restaurant, which prompted his actions. They believed he met her after work and may have given her a ride home. During that ride, he confessed his feelings for Emily, but when she rejected him, he kidnapped her and then murdered her. Unlike the Emily Murray case, there were fewer witnesses in the Gregory Julius case. Evidence was also limited, but new information emerged during the investigation. It was discovered that the car driven by Gregory Julius had been sold shortly after his disappearance. Gregory McKnight's car was identified, and blood found in the back seat matched Gregory Julius's DNA, implicating Gregory McKnight in Gregory Julius's death. However, the motive for killing Gregory Julius remained unclear. With the evidence being so strong, the attorneys did not attempt to argue that Gregory McKnight was innocent and instead chose a different strategy. The defense argued that Gregory McKnight was struggling with mental health issues, claiming that he was unable to control his actions. Additionally, they argued that the victim, Emily, was mentally unstable and was contemplating ending her life, asserting that Gregory McKnight had helped her do so. This notion angered Emily's parents, who were deeply offended by the attorney's argument, as Emily was deeply religious and would never choose to end her life voluntarily. Despite the defense's various tactics, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution. Gregory McKnight was convicted of first-degree murder for Emily's death, as well as kidnapping and burglary. He faces the death penalty. Emily's family is religious and opposed to the death penalty. However, Gregory McKnight was sentenced to death by lethal injection for the murder of Emily, along with a life sentence for the murder of Gregory Julius, 10 years for kidnapping, and a year and a half for burglary. After his conviction, He filed several appeals, all of which were unsuccessful. More than 20 years have passed, but Gregory McKnight is still alive. He expressed his desire to be executed, stating that he wanted to die for his crimes, but later changed his mind. In 2020, Gregory McKnight began arguing that his sentence was unjust due to racial bias in his trial. He alleged that the all-white jury treated him unfairly and insulted him. Emily's parents remain confused about why Gregory McKnight killed their daughter and do not believe his assertions of his obsession with her. They felt that Gregory McKnight harbored resentment towards the college students he worked with at the restaurant, many of whom came from wealthy families, including Emily, whom he chose to take revenge on. However, because of their religious beliefs, Emily's parents believed that her death was not in vain, as it led to the arrest of Gregory McKnight and held him accountable for all the sins he committed, ultimately saving the lives of others. In honor of Emily, they planted a tree near the university. Every year on November 2 and on her birthday, they release a red balloon into the sky in her memory. The family also plans to scatter the rest of Emily's ashes, which are currently kept in an urn at home. The first half of her ashes was buried in the church cemetery. The case of Sarah Raras. Sarah grew up with her sister Nancy in a military family. Their father was an Air Force officer, so the family moved frequently. When Sarah was 6 years old, they relocated to New Mexico, where she started school. IQ tests revealed that she was exceptionally intelligent, particularly in mathematics and the sciences. She was charming, energetic, smiling, and sociable. In the 1980s, she graduated from high school and went on to attend the University of Mines in New Mexico, where she earned a scholarship. Although Sarah lived away from her family, she maintained a close relationship with Nancy, who lived an hour's drive away. Sarah often visited her relatives on weekends. During her time at university, she met a young man named Paul Cohen. After graduating with a bachelor's degree, Sarah and Paul got married. She then pursued a master's degree and hoped to find her own job. However, everything changed when Paul accepted a job with a government agency in Washington, and they moved there. As a result, Sarah had to drop out of school and now lives a 30-hour drive away from her family. Soon after, Sarah found work as an intern at the National Security Agency, where she worked on decrypting classified information. She was known for being a responsible employee. Meanwhile, she was also writing a book about a murder investigation, as she had a passion for detective stories. At work, she became friends with a colleague named Laura Billiter. They spent a lot of time together, socializing with other colleagues. Laura had a family and children, and Sarah, too, wanted to become a mother. However, after 3 years of marriage, Sarah and her husband Paul began to drift apart. Finally, in 1990, Sarah began studying at Johns Hopkins University, a prestigious research institution. She had to take evening classes while working full-time during the day. During her studies, she met a 25 years old named Lorenzo Raras. He was intelligent, sociable, and worked at a local telecommunications company. He comes from a Filipino family. They developed a close relationship and decided to get married. On September 7, 1994, Sarah celebrated her 31st birthday and earned her master's degree. She and her husband, Lorenzo, bought a house in a small town in Maryland. At the age of 33, Sarah became pregnant, and in July 1997, they welcomed a son named Will. During this time, the family moved again, which created more distance between Sarah and her own family. As a result, Sarah relied on support from Lorenzo's family, particularly his mother, Emilia Domingo Raras, who worked in a nursing home and often took Will with her. Although Sarah developed a good relationship with her husband's family, she felt that her husband, Lorenzo, did not pay enough attention to Will or to her. Lorenzo, on the other hand, began to feel jealous of Will. thinking that Sarah was focusing too much on their child. He started to believe that Sarah was using him just to have a baby. As they grew apart, Lorenzo stopped taking the antidepressants prescribed by his psychiatrist. With the changes in their relationship, he began exercising more control over Sarah. Sarah then asked her mother-in-law, Amelia, for help, but Amelia refused to intervene in her son's marriage. This left Sarah feeling stuck and without a clear way forward. In June 1998, Sarah filed for divorce from her husband, Lorenzo, and he moved out of the house just a few days later. During this time, she focused on caring for their child while managing her job. A nanny took care of her son while she was at work, and occasionally she would bring him to visit Lorenzo and Amelia. She also developed an interest in horseback riding, pausing her detective novel after completing 3 chapters. The divorce proceedings dragged on due to disagreements between the two parties. By December 3, 1998, it was crucial to establish who would have custody of their son, as Lorenzo had started fighting for custody. Tragically, Sarah would not live to see the outcome of this decision. On Friday, November 13, 1998, she dropped her son Will off at Lorenzo's. The next day, she spent time shopping with her friend Laura. They planned to call each other on Sunday morning, but Sarah never made the call. Laura tried calling Sarah and found that her friend had left her a message the day before, but she didn't pay attention to it right away. She expected Sarah to explain where Sarah had been. However, instead, she heard a terrifying 40 seconds of audio. Right from the start of the recording, there were loud noises, followed by frantic female screams, a crash as if the phone had fallen, sounds of a struggle, and then a heavy cough and wheezing. Terrified, Laura called Sarah's number, but there was no answer. The line was busy. She spent several hours unsuccessfully trying to reach Sarah. In the evening, Laura called the county police department. She told them that Sarah might be in danger and described what she had heard over the phone, asking them to conduct an investigation. When the police arrived, they immediately noticed a broken window in Sarah's house where she lived with her son. The officers entered the house through the front door and immediately heard the alarm sounding. This seemed odd because a broken window should have set off the alarm. When they checked the living room, they found Sarah Raris, 30 years old, lifeless. She was lying on the floor in an unusual position, amidst a large pool of blood. However, her child was nowhere to be seen. Sarah had been tortured and had numerous abrasions, primarily on her stomach, chest, and neck, which were the areas that received the most severe blows. Forensic experts estimated that Sarah had died approximately 24 hours prior. After the attack, it appeared that someone had searched the house, as several items were missing. However, many valuables were left untouched, leading the police to believe that the crime was staged. Forensic experts later discovered bloody footprints leading from Sarah's body to the broken window. This indicated that the perpetrator had entered and exited through that window. It was also an ideal hiding place, since there was a dense forest behind the house. There was immediate suspicion that the killer knew Sarah. He walked around the house and knew where to go, showing familiarity. The brutality of the act suggested personal motives driven by anger and hatred. The size of the bloody footprints suggested that the shoes were worn by a man, and numerous smudged handprints were found, though no clear fingerprints were recovered, indicating that the attacker likely wore gloves. Forensic experts searched for any additional blood traces left by the killer. Furthermore, during the investigation, they found a large machete with blood on the blade and handle in the yard of the house. That same evening, Laura arrived at Sarah's house and was shocked to see the police cordoning off the area. She became even more panicked when she learned about Sarah's fate. From that moment on, she worried about the well-being of the boy, Will, but the police had no information to share. Later, it was revealed that Will was supposed to be with his father, Lorenzo, at that time. Officers interviewed neighbors in hopes of finding any suspicious activity. Unfortunately, aside from a machete that was sent for analysis, they found no useful evidence. The next day, the entire neighborhood, including Sarah's colleagues, learned about the tragic incident at her house. Sarah's family, living 1,000 kilometers away in Alabama, was also notified. The news hit her sister Nancy the hardest. Experts analyzed a recording of a phone message and confirmed it contained sounds of violence. Detectives reported that the attack occurred shortly after a window was broken. Sarah attempted to call emergency services but accidentally dialed 8 instead of 9. As a result, she ended up leaving a dying message for Laura, whose number was programmed into that speed dial. Laura played a crucial role in the investigation, as she knew Sarah well and provided detectives with detailed information about the circumstances of Sarah's life in the months leading up to the incident. She believed that the only person who could have harmed Sarah was Sarah's ex-husband, Lorenzo. Laura mentioned that Lorenzo was very jealous of their son, Will. He had also stopped taking his depression medication, and his mental health issues had recently worsened. As far as Laura knew, Lorenzo also possessed 2 weapons. Despite this, Sarah tried to maintain a warm relationship with him until the end, and even convinced Lorenzo to sell all the weapons from their home. Ultimately, this led to a divorce. After the divorce, his behavior became completely erratic. Sarah felt the need to go to court to obtain a restraining order for her protection. For instance, on June 27, when Sarah handed Lorenzo the divorce papers, he physically assaulted her, took their child, and left the house, threatening that she would never see the child again. Fearing for her child's safety, Sarah didn't pursue him. That same evening, Lorenzo returned and told Sarah that if she didn't want to lose their son, they needed to be intimate. He was using their child to manipulate her. When he returned home, he refused to leave. The next day, June 28, the threats continued, and he persisted in trying to coerce her into intimate relations. It wasn't until Monday, June 29, that Sarah managed to call the police when Lorenzo was away. When the police arrived, Lorenzo defended himself by claiming that it was his house, his wife, and his son, insisting that nothing illegal had occurred. However, even the officers noted that his behavior was inappropriate. They had to remove Sarah and the child from the home, placing them in a patrol car. On June 29, Sarah filed a lawsuit seeking a restraining order against Lorenzo. This marked the beginning of their battle for custody and child support. Lorenzo moved out, allowing Sarah to return to the house with her 1-year-old son, Will. According to Lorenzo's lawyer, Sarah is responsible for the matter, alleging that she frequently cheated on him. In August, a temporary custody agreement was established, allowing Lorenzo to spend 2 days a week with his son, Will, while Sarah was to care for the child the rest of the time. However, these meetings were tense, as Sarah was often humiliated by Lorenzo. In addition, he continued to threaten and bully her, especially threatening to take the child abroad, such as to the Philippines. Even Lorenzo's lawyer acknowledged that these threats were unreasonable. Nevertheless, he pursued obtaining a passport for the child. Lorenzo did not succeed in his plans. His inappropriate behavior led the police to suspect him of murder, making him the main suspect in Sarah's case. The neighbors lived far from Sarah's home, so no one heard anything during the attack, and there were no witnesses. People did not notice anything unusual, and although there were many alarms, no one had CCTV cameras that could provide evidence. Detectives discovered that on November 13, shortly before Sarah's death, she called her friend Laura. The divorce was nearing its conclusion, and Lorenzo had not gained any advantages in the process. Sarah was genuinely afraid that he might seek revenge for this setback. She asked Laura to protect her son if anything happened to her. She also admitted that she had hidden a frying pan under her bed, which shows the level of fear she lived in during the last months of her life. At the time of Sarah's death, there were only 3 weeks left until the trial's conclusion. It was revealed that her son, Will, was safe and living with the Lorenzo family, which did not align with Sarah's wishes. She strongly objects to Lorenzo and his relatives raising Will if she dies. On November 16, the police went to Lorenzo's family home to inform him of Sarah's death and to monitor his reaction. When he opened the door and heard the news, he fell to his knees and sobbed. However, the police noticed that when he stood up, his face was not wet with tears. He was clearly trying to deceive them. Lorenzo was taken to the police station for questioning. He remained calm but displayed a sense of arrogance, consistently denying any involvement in the murder. Lorenzo told detectives that he picked up Will on Friday and spent all day Saturday with the child. He claimed that during the evening of the attack, he was at home with his family. However, since the witnesses were his relatives, his testimony was considered unreliable. Lorenzo also said that Sarah's killer could have been Don Lewis, her former boss, with whom he claimed she had an affair. Lorenzo suspected that Don might want to kill Sarah to cover up the affair, as this could threaten his high position. However, the case clearly shows the perpetrator's hatred for Sarah and his personal motives. Therefore, detectives still considered Lorenzo the prime suspect. However, at that time there was not enough evidence to charge him, so after interrogation, he was released. A warrant was then issued to collect DNA samples and search the Lorenzo family home. However, the process was difficult and dragged on for months. Meanwhile, blood analysis from the crime scene continued. Detectives maintained communication with the Lorenzo family, but they quickly contradicted his statements. Some family members claimed he was with them that evening, while others insisted he worked until 10 p.m. A search of his home and car did not turn up any items related to the murder weapon. They also did not find shoes with footprints similar to those found at the scene. Detectives decided to re-interview Lorenzo, but he had hired a lawyer and refused to cooperate with the investigation. He is intelligent and has 2 master's degrees, which complicates matters. Then, officers from the NSA came to the aid of the police and decided to conduct their own investigation into the death of Sarah, their employee, using advanced technology and top experts. By this time, most tests and checks had been completed. The forensic expert determined that Sarah died from a deep neck wound that caused her to lose 8% of her blood. She suffered multiple deep wounds and significant blood loss from cuts on her wrists. Her lungs and liver were punctured, and she also sustained a serious brain injury that had initially been overlooked. The most severe injury was a nearly fatal blow to her neck. Meanwhile, NSA agents reviewed the recordings that Sarah had sent to Laura. They discovered that she had mentioned the name of her killer, Mike, as brother Lorenzo's. So, they decided to interview Mike, but he appeared very nervous and did not provide any useful information. Later, Mike's ex-wife, Becky, agreed to assist the police by using wiretaps. She called Mike, and they spoke for an extended period, attempting to extract information through leading questions, but to no avail. Eventually, the NSA completed its investigation and concluded that Sarah's murder had a personal motive. A month later, the DNA analysis results from the traces found on the machete were received. The analysis revealed Sarah's blood, along with traces of a male, likely her killer. To the surprise of law enforcement, the male DNA did not match any samples collected from the suspects in the case. The Lorenzo family and Don Lewis remained silent for a month, during which no useful information was obtained. Detectives even contacted the FBI, but no new leads emerged. However, the agents were able to disprove the theory that Sarah mentioned her killer's name in the recording. Instead, the sounds heard were her death rattles. A breakthrough finally occurred when the station received a significant phone call from a detective with the Baltimore County Police. He revealed that an 18-year-old named Ardale Tickles had confessed to the murder. Ardale was in jail for attacking his former boss at McDonald's. While awaiting trial, he told a cellmate that he had killed a woman, and the details matched Sarah's case. In exchange for a lighter sentence, the cellmate agreed to record Ardale's confession with a hidden microphone. Ardale provided a detailed account of the murder that took place on November 13. He admitted he didn't even know the victim's name. He broke into her house through a window, used foul language, and attacked her for an extended period. After the assault, he stood on her head and tried to crush it, but was unsuccessful. He confessed that a former colleague had encouraged him to commit the crime for $5,000. Despite doubts about the reliability of his testimony, he provided important unpublished details about the attack, suggesting he was indeed involved in the murder. Ardale had already confessed, and the police wanted to hear his account directly to identify the person who had hired him. Ardale mentioned that a woman had approached him and labeled Sarah as a bad person. Ardale is black, while Sarah is said to have been racist. Furthermore, he feels hatred towards her because she is accused of being involved in the miscarriage of his best friend. He then decided to kill her. He told the police that he did not know the motives of the person who hired him to kill Sarah, and that he had been manipulated into carrying out the murder. Although he was expected to receive $5,000 for the job, he actually received only $3,000. However, he did not consider this a serious matter. He viewed the murder as a matter of honor. Ardale was shown photos of the main suspects in the case but did not recognize anyone. It was strange that he didn't even know the name of the person who had hired him. Ardale had a troubled childhood. His mother had schizophrenia, and he spent a significant amount of time in a boarding school where he was seriously injured in a fight with other students. This experience left a lasting impact on his life. Although he had no prior criminal record, he was very aggressive and easily influenced. When the police showed Ardale a photo of Lorenzo's mother, Emilia, he recognized her as the one who had hired him. He was shocked to realize how cruelly he had been deceived. Sarah was not a racist. She was simply interfering in the family of her ex-husband, Lorenzo. Words alone are not enough to constitute solid evidence and bring charges. However, it was clear that Ardale and Emilia were in cahoots. DNA evidence from the machete handle confirmed Ardale's involvement, and Emilia's guilt was established through her financial transactions when she paid for the murder. Consequently, Emilia was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. One of Lorenzo's sisters revealed the nature of the relationship between Emilia and Sarah. Emilia had interfered too much in her son Lorenzo's marriage to Sarah. She was upset that Sarah did not listen to him. As Sarah and Lorenzo's relationship deteriorated, Emilia developed intense hatred towards Sarah. In her conversation with the police, Emilia acknowledged having conflicts with Sarah. She felt that Sarah's actions were a personal affront, largely due to the culture in the Philippines, where she grew up. There, children are expected to obey their mothers unconditionally. Emilia pointed out this cultural difference and considered Sarah's disobedient and disrespectful behavior towards her to be equivalent to a serious crime. Therefore, she believed that attacking Sarah was completely justified and felt no remorse for her actions. In January 2000, it was unusual that no members of Emilia's family were present in the courtroom, except for Emilia herself. She received no support from her family. Prosecutors argued that the motive for the attack was fear of losing custody of his nephew, Will. To carry out the murder, Emilia convinced Ardale to do it for her. She even expressed frustration that he was unable to kill Sarah as planned. After the hearings, Emilia was convicted of first-degree murder, but the charge of conspiracy to commit murder could not be established. At this point, Emilia changed her testimony, claiming that she only intended to scare Sarah into giving up custody of Will, not kill Sarah. Emilia stated that she showed Sarah's house to Ardale, along with some stones. However, the detectives did not believe her. Ardale knew the layout of the house and could get there without setting off the alarm. This clearly indicated that she had provided him with information, suggesting that their intention was more than just intimidation. Furthermore, no one would pay $3,000 just to have rocks thrown at a house. The verdict was announced on April 18, 2000. Emilia cried in court, claiming that she never meant for this to happen, but no one believed her. Emilia Domingo Raras was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Emilia stated that her son, Lorenzo, was not involved in her plan and was unaware of it. Their prison phone calls were recorded, and no evidence proved his guilt. Nevertheless, Sarah's family believes that Lorenzo persuaded his mother to commit the crime. Later, Lorenzo reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitted his guilt, and expressed remorse, stating that he prays daily for Sarah and her family. Lorenzo Raras was sentenced to life in prison after confessing, but he became eligible for parole in 2009. In 2009, Emilia appealed her sentence, asking for a review because she claimed she had changed, becoming kinder and more religious, but her request was rejected. On February 8, 2023, Lorenzo passed away on his birthday at the age of 57. Emilia, now 88 years old, remains in prison. In 2024, Ardale became eligible for parole and submitted a petition, asserting that he has changed and wishes to turn his life around. A decision regarding his parole is still pending. The case of Angie Dodge. Angie Dodge, who worked as a sales clerk at a cosmetics store in the summer of 1996, had just bought her first apartment in Idaho Falls and moved out of her mother Carol's house. In her neighborhood, everyone knew each other, and doors were rarely locked. The area was quiet and prosperous. However, Angie had only lived in her new apartment for 3 weeks, and she could not have foreseen what was about to happen. Angie and her mother had a strained relationship, often arguing. Carol believed that her daughter had grown up and wanted to be independent, and that she did not need to control Angie. On Thursday, June 13, 1996, Angie was supposed to go to work at the cosmetics store, but she never showed up. Worried, a friend went to check on her at her apartment. When he arrived around 11 a.m., he found the door unlocked. When he entered, he discovered Angie lying on the floor with multiple injuries and immediately called 911 for help. Police quickly arrived at the crime scene and found no signs of forced entry into the apartment. They also discovered that Angie had fought for her life. She had been abused and stabbed multiple times. Her mother, Carol, was devastated by the tragedy that had befallen her family. Police were able to collect a semen sample from the attacker, providing DNA evidence. They then began collecting DNA samples from local men and interviewed Angie's friends and acquaintances, including 20-year-old Chris Tapp. Chris initially denied any involvement, but under pressure from the police, he admitted that he, Angie, and 2 other friends had been in her apartment on the night of the incident. A fight broke out, and one of the men attacked Angie with a knife. During this time, Chris held her down to prevent her from escaping. Chris Tapp was arrested, but throughout the trial, he maintained his innocence. He alleged that another man named Mike was responsible for Angie's death. Chris's DNA did not match that of the real attacker. However, on May 28, 1998, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Although Chris Tapp was in custody, Angie Dodge's case remained unsolved because the DNA found at the crime scene did not match Chris Tapp. Police spent time trying to identify the source of the DNA, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The case died down. Angie's mother, Carol Dodge, was determined to find justice for her daughter. She believed that the real culprit was still at large. In 2009, DNA evidence collected from Angie's apartment was sent to the National Crime Database, but no matches were found. Carol then consulted a DNA expert who advised her on a new technique called familial DNA searching. This method allows police to search databases of convicted criminals to identify relatives who may have similar DNA. Carol went to the Idaho Falls Police Department and the district attorney's office, reporting her plan and asking for police help. The police were interested in Carol's suggestion. In the summer of 2014, police officer Patrick McKenna searched a public DNA database from a major genealogy company called Genealogy. He discovered that a DNA sample in the database matched 97% of the DNA found at the crime scene. Patrick believed he had identified a relative of the suspect. The police then obtained a search warrant to discover the identity of this relative, later identifying him as Michael Usry Jr. In December 2014, more than 18 years after Angie Dodge's death, police went to Michael's home in New Orleans. They asked him if he had ever been to Idaho Falls. Michael replied that when he was 19, he had gone to Idaho Falls to visit friends. The police then obtained a warrant and collected a DNA sample from Michael. He felt uncomfortable with the situation and asked for a lawyer. Michael searched online for information about the Angie Dodge case, and what he found scared him. He became concerned about what the police might do next and began staying home instead of going out. He believed that his phone calls and online activities were being monitored. Although he knew he was innocent and had nothing to do with the case, he began to suspect that his father might be the one who committed the crime. Michael participated in a genealogy project at their local church, and his DNA appeared in a public database. A genealogy company called Genealogy later purchased the database, leading to the police finding a match. On January 13, 2015, Michael Usry Jr. received an email with the results of his DNA test, confirming that his DNA did not match that of the criminal, clearing him of all suspicion. The genealogy company, which had lost the trust of its customers due to security issues, then made its database private, which was no longer available to the public. Michael later created a documentary about his experience. Angie's mother, Carol Dodge, then contacted Michael to discuss an important matter. When they met, Carol asked Michael to write down the names of all of his relatives on his father's side. Carol and Michael grew closer when he decided to help her find the criminal who had caused her grief. He created a family tree on a piece of paper, revealing that Michael's grandfather had 6 brothers. However, it was also possible that some of the relatives were illegitimate. By this time, Chris Tapp had been in prison for nearly 20 years when the Angie Dodge case again attracted media attention. Reporters contacted him, and upon viewing a 20-year-old interrogation video, Chris claimed that his confession was false, stating that the police had forced him to confess on camera. Carol, Angie's mother, does not believe that Chris Tapp was responsible for her daughter's death. More than 20 years later, Carol is still working to find the real killer. Mike Heavey, a retired Supreme Court judge, believed that Chris was innocent and spent 4 years trying to prove it. After watching the interrogation videos, he realized that Chris seemed to be unaware of important details. Mike Heavey concluded that Chris was forced to change his story 6 times during 9 interrogations. Although the police recorded all 7 polygraph tests, no one took the time to review the recordings. Mike Heavey, along with a polygraph expert, believes that the polygraph tests were used to coerce Chris into lying. The police broke protocol during the polygraph test by threatening Chris with a gas chamber, believing it would not be detected. Mike Heavey reviewed the evidence and determined that Chris had been manipulated and coerced into confessing to a crime he did not commit. Mike Heavey hoped that the polygraph recordings he found would be enough to grant Chris Tapp a new trial. In March 2017, Chris Tapp was one hearing away from a decision that his attorney believed could lead to his release. However, the sheriff argued that Chris's testimony, coupled with the absence of his DNA at the crime scene, did not prove his innocence. The district attorney's office proposed a plea deal. Chris would maintain the charges related to Angie's death, but the conviction for Angie's abuse would be dismissed. His sentence would be reduced by 10 years, allowing him to be released immediately, since he had already served 20 years and could be eligible for parole. Chris Tapp accepted the deal and was released in 2017 after serving 2 decades in prison. After his release, Chris Tapp found a job, got married, and began living a normal life. Meanwhile, Carol continued to search for the real criminal. She believed that modern technology would help her solve Angie's case. On May 16, 2019, the sheriff announced that they had arrested a man whose DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene. Genetic genealogist Cece Moore and her lab have made significant progress in solving cases through genealogy and public databases. Angie's case was the 56th they solved, and they successfully traced a family tree that identified the real criminal, who was connected to the Usri family. The police secretly collected DNA from the men by following them for days and searching for discarded items such as cigarette butts, soda cans, or plastic straws. They took DNA samples from all 6 men, but the results were surprising. None of the samples matched the DNA from the crime scene. Police began investigating the family's children, who were not listed in the family tree. They later identified a man named Brian Drips. The police discovered that they had interviewed Brian at the beginning of the investigation into the Angie Dodge case. He lived just across the street from Angie's house. When Carol Dodge heard this, she exclaimed that it took her 23 years to find him, and he lived right across the street. The first 25 pages of the investigation detail the interrogation process, but the criminal report indicates that on the day of the tragedy, a young officer conducted a brief interview with Brian. He claimed he knew nothing about the incident and did not hear anything from his neighbor. The police did not ask him to undergo a DNA test. About 7 weeks after the tragedy, Brian moved from Idaho Falls to a new apartment. Later, the police located him and discreetly collected a cigarette filter that he discarded near his residence. His DNA matched the DNA found at the scene of the tragedy with 100% accuracy. Brian was brought in for questioning and appeared very nervous, with shaking hands. For hours, he denied any involvement in Angie's death. However, when the police informed him that his DNA was found at the crime scene, his demeanor changed significantly. Ultimately, Brian admitted that he was involved in the case and acted alone, which meant that Chris Tapp could not have been present. 2 months after Brian's arrest, Chris faced a retrial and was completely exonerated. In October 2020, Chris Tapp filed a lawsuit against the city of Idaho Falls and the Idaho Falls Police Department. The city agreed to pay Chris $12 million in compensation for the 20 years he spent in prison before being exonerated. Chris acknowledged that no amount of money could compensate for the more than 20 years he spent in prison for a crime he did not commit. But life goes on, and he continues to move forward. In 2021, during the trial, 56-year-old Brian Drips pleaded guilty to the abuse and murder of Angie Dodge. He confessed that he was drunk and using illegal drugs that night. Brian Drips was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years, meaning he could be released at the age of 76. The case of Ursula and Sabina Eriksson. The story begins on the morning of May 17, 2008. Inspectors from the Birmingham Road Service, monitoring video footage from road cameras in London, spotted 2 women walking on the median strip of the busy M6 motorway. The police were called to deal with the unusual situation, and a film crew from a morning news program also attended the scene. They thought the women might be eccentric, drunk, or under the influence of drugs. As the patrol car carrying police and journalists arrived at the scene, a radio message reported that one of the women had left the median strip and walked into the road, where she was hit by a car. At the time, no one knew how serious her injuries were, but those present began to realize that the story was becoming increasingly complicated. When the reporters arrived, They saw other patrol officers, who had arrived a little earlier, talking to the strange women on the side of the road. Neither of the women appeared to be injured. Only later did it become clear that one of the women had actually been hit by a car on the road. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries. The twins looked quite normal. They were not shaking or screaming, and they were listening and occasionally looking around. The reporters began filming the police explaining the incident on camera, when suddenly something happened that even eyewitnesses could hardly believe. One of the sisters, Ursula, suddenly threw her bag onto the asphalt and ran into the street just as a large truck had passed. The patrol officer tried to stop her by grabbing her coat sleeve, but his efforts were in vain. In a state of obvious distress, she ran forward and took off her coat, which the police were holding. The truck was approaching, and she ducked down and crawled under its wheels. Although the truck driver reacted quickly, he could not stop in time. The truck rolled over Ursula's leg, breaking it. She screamed, then fell silent and lay motionless on the road. Overwhelmed by the scene, all the passers-by rushed to her aid. At that moment, Sabina Eriksson, who was standing on the side of the road, seized the opportunity when the police were distracted. She rushed into the road after her sister and was hit head-on by a Volkswagen, which threw her a considerable distance. It was hard to comprehend this surreal situation. The two women looked so much alike and seemed to be facing death at such a young age, lying on the road just 3 meters apart. Despite their serious injuries, both were still alive. Ursula had a broken pelvis and both legs. Sabina and Ursula said nothing, only groaning softly in pain. When they regained their composure, they both tried to stand up despite their injuries, ignoring everyone's pleas for them to stay still until the ambulance arrived. At this point, they began to swear. The sisters then fought back against the patrol officers as if police were their worst enemies. Traffic on the freeway was stopped, and an ambulance helicopter was called to pick up the injured. Witnesses believed that Ursula and Sabina were under the influence of heavy drugs, which seemed to be the only explanation for their strange behavior. Both appeared to feel no pain and were very aggressive towards the police. The sisters appeared confused about their surroundings and what had happened. Sabina suddenly stood up. Despite having been hit by a car, she appeared unharmed. Instead, she exhibited a strong urge to escape. She seemed completely oblivious to her injuries, demonstrating incredible stamina as she tried to move away. A policewoman tried to calm Sabina by holding her hand, but Sabina responded by turning around and pushing the officer away. Sabina then attempted to evade the police's grasp. After taking off her coat, she assumed a fighting stance, ready for confrontation. At this point, the police had to step in to assist. A driver who was watching the scene saw Sabina being restrained and forced into the police car. During the struggle, she screamed angrily and fought back violently, as if she were fighting for her life. Ursula repeatedly called the police, insisting, "Police, I recognize you. You are not real police officers." Although some police officers showed her their badges, Ursula remained aggressive and tried to fight the ambulance staff. She bit their hands and attempted to resist. After being injected with a strong sedative, she calmed down, allowing them to take her to the helicopter. At this point, everyone concluded that Ursula and Sabina Eriksson had used a hallucinogen. Both women were airlifted to the nearest hospital. Ursula underwent surgery to remove her ruptured spleen and suffered multiple fractures to her spine, pelvis, and both legs. Doctors, on the other hand, found no serious injuries on Sabina. By this time, about 5 hours had passed since the accident. Sabina had calmed down considerably and appeared happier, with no signs of aggression as before. She answered some questions but remained silent on others and made no attempt to fight back or escape. Overall, she behaved normally and appropriately. The officers who came to arrest her were surprised by what they encountered. Sabina's demeanor was now completely different. Before them stood a gentle, quiet blonde woman in a hospital gown, who followed them to the police car without resistance. After placing her in the back seat, they chose not to handcuff Sabina. When she arrived at the station, she chatted about the weather, laughed, joked, and even flirted with the officers. She allowed them to search her without protest. This behavior seemed unbelievable because just hours earlier, she had appeared ready to unleash her fury on anyone who came near her. Because her communication style had changed so dramatically, the officers did not attempt to calm her down and began to treat her normally. The police tried to talk to Sabina to find out more details, but strangely, she seemed to have forgotten everything that had happened. She showed no interest in younger sister Ursula and did not ask about her. Instead, Sabina frequently looked at her reflection, was preoccupied with her appearance, and searched for her clothes and jewelry. When asked about her behavior, she would either remain silent or tell the police that she did not remember. Sabina insisted that she had never intended to harm herself or anyone else. Ultimately, the interrogation yielded no results. Later, tests confirmed that neither Ursula nor Sabina Eriksson had any traces of drugs or alcohol in their systems. There was nothing suspicious about Sabina's home, and the police found no evidence that either sister had ever used or purchased hard drugs. Sabina faced charges of assaulting a police officer and causing a public nuisance, while Ursula appeared to have avoided any legal consequences. However, the police were surprised by a call from Sabina's husband, who had no idea where his wife was or what had happened. The police who took up the sisters' case were left stunned by the twins' unpredictable behavior. After speaking to Sabina on the day of the incident, police and psychiatrists concluded that, despite her previous condition on the M6, she was now mentally stable. She was aware of her surroundings, understood who was with her, and accurately assessed herself, the time, and her environment. Most importantly, she was stable and posed no danger to herself or others. Incredibly, her previous bouts of insanity on the highway were temporary, and there was no longer any reason to diagnose or commit Sabina to a psychiatric facility. Sabina was detained before her trial. On 19 May 2008, her trial took place. Sabina Eriksson was found sane and admitted to assaulting a police officer and causing a dangerous situation on the road. The court fined her and sentenced her to 1 day in jail, which she served in pre-trial detention. Sabina and Ursula were then released, although just days earlier, Sabina had deliberately thrown herself in front of a car and violently attacked a police officer. No one could explain her sudden bout of insanity, but everyone believed that it had been completely normal. This meant that she was free to go wherever she wanted. During this time, police began to piece together the events leading up to the M6 motorway incident. The twin sisters, Sabina and Ursula, were born on 3 November 1967 in the Swedish city of Sunne. They were not the only children. They had an older sister and an older brother. Ursula and Sabina, along with their relatives, remained in contact with each other. However, Ursula and Sabina Eriksson had not seen each other for 8 years until the day before the traffic accident on 16 May 2008. On that day, Ursula flew from the United States to visit Sabina, who lived in Mallow, County Cork, Ireland, with her husband and 2 children. Ursula then stayed at her house. The next day, at 2 a.m., the sisters secretly boarded a ferry to Liverpool, England, with their own motives. Upon arrival, they deliberately went to the police station. In subsequent interviews, the sisters did not explain why they had left Ireland for England. According to police reports, at around 8:30 a.m. on 16 May 2008, they went to Liverpool police station and claimed that Sabina's children, who lived in Mallow, were in danger. The sisters' story was so chaotic and disorganized that the police could not understand it at first. After hearing their agitated account, the officers became suspicious and attempted to verify their claims. They contacted the Dublin police, who were responsible for maintaining order in Mallow. They discovered that the previous night, neighbors had called the police to Sabina Eriksson's home due to loud shouting and arguments within the family. It was revealed that the couple had not only argued, but had also been seriously fighting. The police tried to calm Sabina Eriksson and her husband by warning them about the potential consequences of their argument. The tension seemed to ease, and the officers decided to leave. However, no one knew what happened next in the house. After discussing the situation with colleagues in Dublin, the Liverpool police realized they were dealing with a distressed woman facing marital problems. Due to the expense and complexity of intervening in personal matters, the police advised Sabina to calm down and return to her children. Despite this advice, Ursula and Sabina Eriksson did not return to their home in Mallow. Instead, at 11:30, they unexpectedly boarded a National Express bus to London. Both sisters were carrying large bags that were difficult to manage. The bus driver informed all passengers that such bags should be stored in the luggage compartment, but the sisters anxiously held on to their bags, refusing to put them away. The driver grew increasingly anxious and began observing them in his rearview mirror. He noticed Ursula and Sabina Eriksson's tense demeanor. They kept looking around and seemed to be planning something. Most notably, they clutched their bags tightly, as if they were their only hope of survival. After safely arriving at the nearest intercity bus station, the driver dropped Ursula and Sabina Eriksson off and reported the incident to the station manager. The manager, following protocol, immediately contacted the police, informing them that there were 2 women at her station who might have bombs in their bags. When the police arrived and searched the sisters, they found nothing suspicious and considered the call a false alarm. Perhaps if the police had paid more attention to Ursula and Sabina Eriksson's mental state, they might have been able to prevent a series of tragic events. However, their main goal was to prevent a potential terrorist attack, not to assess the women's behavior. So the sisters were allowed to leave. For some reason, they were determined to get to London, but they were short on money. It is unclear what they were thinking, but it seems that the only option they considered to reach the British capital was to walk along the median strip of the M6 motorway. They were discovered by a road inspector at 15:20 that day. The story is not over yet. There is still much to explore. Let's take another look at Sabina. After her release, psychiatrists, police, and judges assessed her and determined that she was no longer a danger to society. When she left court, she was instructed to return home to her husband and children. However, instead of going home, she began wandering around the city, lost in thought. Interestingly, she was wearing her sister's green cardigan, which Ursula had discarded before she was hit by the truck. With the belongings the police had given her in a bag, she wandered into the park where she met 2 local men, Glenn Hollinshead and his friend Peter. They had just enjoyed a few beers at a nearby bar. Feeling lonely and missing her twin younger sister Ursula, she felt the need to talk to someone. She approached Glenn Hollinshead's dog, stroked its fur and talked to it. She then turned to the men nearby and began to share her story. She told them that her twin sister had been in a serious car accident and was currently in the hospital. Sabina said that she was alone and without any support. Now she really wanted to find and visit younger sister Ursula. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Glenn Hollinshead and Peter, moved by her story, expressed their desire to help her. Glenn, a former military doctor known for his kindness and openness, invited Sabina to stay with him for a few days. He promised to help her find her twin sister. Unfortunately, this decision sealed Glenn's fate. The next day, Sabina, whom he had helped, attacked Glenn and tragically killed him in his own home. Around 8 p.m., Glenn's friends came to his house. At first, they chatted normally and drank a few beers together. However, Sabina appeared distressed and anxious, focused on thoughts of Ursula. She was sitting on a chair when she suddenly stood up, looking out into the dark night. Then she hurriedly pulled the curtain shut, seemingly frightened but unable to explain her strange behavior. Over time, Sabina's actions began to seem paranoid. She refused food and drink. Later, Sabina offered cigarettes to Glenn and his friends, but then abruptly snatched them away, insisting that the cigarettes might be poisoned. Just before midnight, Peter decided to leave. What happened between Glenn and Sabina afterwards is known only to Sabina. Around noon the next day, Glenn contacted his brother, who worked at the University Hospital of North Staffordshire. Glenn asked his brother to help him find Ursula Eriksson, Sabina's sister. Glenn recounts Sabina's story to his brother, but they realize that finding Ursula is a big challenge. After that, there was a gap in the story, and no one knew what happened. At 7:40 p.m. on May 20, while dinner was being prepared, Glenn left the house to ask a neighbor, Frank Booth, for tea bags, then went back inside. A minute later, he staggered outside bleeding and told Frank Booth that Sabina had stabbed him. Glenn then quickly collapsed and died from his injuries. Before he died, Glenn asked Frank Booth to look after his dog. Frank Booth quickly called the police to report the situation. According to the police report, an ambulance arrived at approximately 8 p.m. On the way to Glenn's home, paramedics found a woman standing in the street, holding a hammer and occasionally hitting herself in the head with it. The woman was later identified as Sabina Eriksson. Minutes earlier, she had attacked Glenn, causing his death. Several paramedics rushed to check on him, while 2 other paramedics rushed to assist Sabina. At that time, a motorist named Joshua Gradage attempted to wrest the hammer from her hand. While struggling with him, Sabina screamed, took a brick out of her pocket, and hit him in the back of the head, causing him to become dizzy and fall. Paramedics witnessed this strange and frightening development. They quickly understood that they were dealing with a very dangerous person who needed to be restrained and controlled. Although pursuing aggressive individuals was not usually part of their duties, the ambulance crew pursued Sabina in an attempt to subdue her. She moved at incredible speed, evading them and running down the highway. The chase lasted several minutes, and it was soon discovered that she was heading toward a 12-meter-high bridge. With a single leap, she reached the railing of the bridge and without hesitation, jumped, ending one of the strangest and most confusing street chases in British history. Sabina Eriksson survived her ordeal. Surprisingly, most people who jump from a bridge die. However, Sabina only suffered 2 broken ankles and a head injury. When she arrived at the hospital, she appeared completely normal, showing no signs of aggression, delirium, or paranoia. It is unclear whether she truly remembered nothing or was just hiding her past. Either way, she remained silent. On June 6, 2008, she appeared in court for her first trial, sitting in a wheelchair. The prosecution presented a long list of charges against her, but provided no details about her motives. Sabina's lawyer was equally confused, unable to explain her actions. As a result, both sides quickly reached a settlement, although psychiatrists declared her sane at the time of the murder. Neither Ursula nor Sabina Eriksson had a clear motive. How can we explain their actions in just a few days? The lead psychiatrist at the trial told the prosecution that Sabina Eriksson was suffering from a delusional disorder caused by excitement at the time of the murder, which may have occurred during a mass psychosis. He confirmed that she is now fully sane during the hearings. Psychiatrists have stated that Sabina suffered from acute polymorphic psychosis during her moments of madness, which was also caused by mass psychosis. In the fall of 2009, a British court convicted Sabina Eriksson of several crimes, including the manslaughter of Glenn Hollinshead. Although she admitted her guilt, she claimed that she had no memory of the events, had no malicious intent, and did all this in a state of clouded mind. The judge considered Sabina Eriksson's case to be the most difficult he had ever faced. He believed that her guilt in the case was minimal because she was not aware of her actions at the time. He acknowledged that Glenn Hollinshead's family might not be happy with his verdict. However, He based his decision on the understanding that the murder was caused by temporary mental incapacity and that Sabina's level of guilt was low. Therefore, this verdict was not intended to punish Sabina. The actions of the twin sisters, Sabina and Ursula Eriksson, were attributed to a phenomenon known as collective schizophrenia, which has different names in many languages. As a result, Sabina Eriksson was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Both Ursula and Sabina were affected by their own insanity. This mental state caused Sabina to hear imaginary voices that led her to act strangely. She held false beliefs that she thought were true. In September 2009, Sabina was sent to a regular women's prison. During her time there, she experienced a brief period of erratic behavior, but afterward, she seemed to have no memory of it. Sabina served 2.5 years of her 5-year sentence. She was released early due to an amnesty. Younger sister Ursula returned to live and work in the United States. After completing her sentence, Sabina returned to live with her husband and children in Ireland. Sabina never revealed why she and younger sister Ursula were in England, what happened that day on the M6, or what happened to Glenn Hollingshead. Some believe that the criminal justice system failed in the case of Ursula and Sabina Eriksson because it did not answer many questions or hold those responsible accountable. Glenn's brother has expressed his disappointment that Sabina Eriksson was allowed to go free after committing a serious crime. He believes that Sabina's mental condition should be recognized and treated by professionals. However, psychiatrists seem to dismiss his concerns, stating that there is no reliable diagnostic system for identifying such conditions based on observation alone. Interestingly, the twins' brother disagrees with the court's decision, although his reasons differ from those of Glenn's brother. The twins' brother believes that Ursula and Sabina were not temporarily insane in May 2008. Instead, he argues that they were fleeing a real threat, a man who was chasing and threatening them. The case of Benny Lynn Burke. In February 2021, a mysterious disappearance occurred in Dundee on the 250th birthday of single mother Benny Lynn Burke and her 2-year-old daughter Jellica. What really happened to them? Let's explore this case and learn about one of the most disturbing events in Scottish history. Dundee is a vibrant city, home to around 45,000 people. Benny Lynn fell in love with the UK, where her child, Jellica, was born. She was born in November 1995 in the Philippines and had an older brother and sister. Growing up, Benny Lynn was an ambitious person. She worked and studied hard, focusing on getting her dream degree while contemplating her future. In 2015, her life took an unexpected turn when she met Lexington Burke online, a wealthy landlord from the UK who was almost 40 years her senior. Despite the significant age gap, they fell in love and decided to have a child. A month after their wedding on the island of Samar in the Philippines, their daughter Jellica was born. Unfortunately, their happiness did not last long. In 2019, after moving to the UK, their marriage began to fall apart and eventually ended in divorce. Benny Lynn became a single mother living 3 miles from Bristol in Kingswood. She found a place to live, and her family began a new chapter. For the first time, Benny Lynn felt a sense of freedom. She joined a Facebook group for mothers and began to connect with them. One member, Vicky Whip, offered support and complimented Benny Lynn, calling her a very kind and pleasant person. Her daughter Jellica developed normally, curious and confident in exploring her surroundings. For several months, Benny Lynn worked at a nursing home while also selling car vacuum cleaners online, sending part of her income to her family in the Philippines. Life was stable and peaceful, with no signs of impending problems. In 2021, Benny Lynn and her daughter were living abroad, and she missed her parents terribly, calling and texting them every day. Feeling lonely, Benny Lynn frequently visited the dating site Filipino Cupid. One day, she started chatting with Andrew Innes, a 52-year-old man. They quickly connected and decided to meet in person. Benny Lynn accepted his invitation to his home in Dundee, as she was curious to learn more about Scotland. Andrew wanted to help Benny Lynn find a job as a public relations manager that paid $1,000 a month, but Benny Lynn preferred her current job. Andrew was a kind and caring person, which made him the type of person Benny Lynn wanted to connect with to find happiness again. Her sister, Sheila Aquino, supported her decision. On February 17, 2021, Benny Lynn picked up Jellica and drove to Scotland for a weekend with Andrew. During the trip, she video chatted with her sister. Jellica packed very little because she planned to return home soon. Curious about the man who had captured her younger sister's heart, Sheila asked for an introduction. Without hesitation, Benny Lynn introduced them, and Sheila observed Andrew's tall figure and bald head with interest. On February 18, Benny Lynn spent the day exploring the city of Dundee. She visited impressive museums, enjoyed local parks, and toured popular tourist attractions. While sightseeing, she called her sister Sheila to share these experiences. Benny Lynn showed Sheila Andrew's house, and they admired the white structure. Little did they know this would be their last conversation. The next morning, Sheila texted Benny Lynn but received no reply. 2 days later, she still hadn't heard back. Finally, on February 21, Andrew contacted Sheila and informed her that Benny Lynn and her daughter had gone to Glasgow with a man she had met online. This news did little to ease Sheila's anxiety. She was doing her best to understand the situation. Was Benny Lynn really safe? Why hadn't Benny Lynn contacted her? Andrew reassured Sheila that Benny Lynn would get in touch later, but it was unusual for Benny Lynn to remain silent for so long. This worried Sheila. All she wanted to know was whether Benny Lynn was alive. Andrew insisted that Benny Lynn was fine and claimed she had met a good man. Sheila felt confused after her conversation with Andrew. It seemed he wanted to hastily end the discussion. He mentioned wanting to terminate his relationship with Benny Lynn and asserted that he would delete all records of their contact, claiming it was essential for their safety. On March 1, Benny Lynn was scheduled to take her daughter Jellica to a routine pediatrician's appointment, but the appointment never took place. Concern turned to panic when they learned that Benny Lynn and Jellica had last been seen on February 18. The family urgently reported their disappearance to the police, who were extremely worried. Benny Lynn's brother even dreamed of blurry images of his sister and her daughter, heightening the family's fears. Meanwhile, the police received information that Benny Lynn had been in Dundee the previous week. After conducting an investigation, they identified a man named Andrew Innes. When the police knocked on Andrew's door and asked about the whereabouts of Benny Lynn and her daughter Jellica, Andrew replied that they were in Glasgow. What surprised the police was his refusal to let them in, citing that his daughter had just finished bathing. The officers caught a glimpse of the neatly dressed girl inside and insisted on entering the house. What they discovered was chaos. The kitchen was a mess, with pots and pans strewn across the stairs. The officers inquired again about Benny Lynn's whereabouts, and in a shocking revelation, Andrew admitted that he had killed her and hidden her under the floorboards. Let's take a closer look at Andrew's life. He was born in June 1970 and initially attended Alva Academy. He later moved to the University of Aberdeen and pursued a career in the video game industry. Andrew married a Japanese woman, and they had children together. The family eventually moved to Japan, but their marriage ended in 2019. After the divorce, Andrew was deported back to the UK, which profoundly affected him. He stopped meeting women in person and instead created several profiles on dating sites to search for potential partners. Police discovered his profiles on only 4 dating sites, including Filipino Cupid. It was on this site that he began communicating with Benny Lynn and quickly became the prime suspect in the murders of her and her daughter. Andrew's dark secrets were uncovered when police examined his laptop and found a well-organized spreadsheet of documents and data that he had collected from dating sites. The spreadsheet provided insight into his thought processes and included details about the women he interacted with online. Each entry was rated based on criteria such as age, height, weight, and whether they had children. He was particularly fond of women in their 20s and 30s with young children. Andrew told police that his argument with Benny-Lynn turned violent, leading to her death. He initially denied any involvement in her death, but later confessed. Police quickly arrested Andrew. On March 5, 2021, he was taken to the police station, where he claimed that he had buried Benny-Lynn and her daughter in the kitchen under a thick layer of concrete. Andrew's house was then searched. Under the kitchen floor, they found a large black garbage bag, just the right size to conceal an adult body. Nearby, there was a smaller bag. The findings shocked everyone in the house. Andrew had not only killed Benny-Lynn and her child, but also hidden their bodies beneath his kitchen floor. The events that unfolded shocked the community, leaving many confused and asking the same questions. Forensic experts stated that Benny-Lynn's DNA was found on a sledgehammer left at the scene, confirming it as the murder weapon. An autopsy revealed that Benny-Lynn suffered chest injuries and severe head injuries. Jellica's autopsy determined that she had been suffocated and had significant pressure marks on her neck and around her mouth. Sheila had received a missed call from her sister's ex-husband, Lexington Burke, who informed her of the deaths of Benny-Lynn and her daughter. Sheila was shocked to hear this information. When she regained her composure, she broke the heartbreaking news to her parents, who lived far away and were unaware of the situation. Benny-Lynn's family had hoped that her move abroad would bring happiness and the fulfillment of her dreams. Unfortunately, for Benny-Lynn and her daughter, their experience in a foreign country turned into a terrible nightmare. Her father wondered why his kind-hearted daughter had met such a tragic fate. In the weeks following the death of her loved ones, Sheila struggled to come to terms with the loss. She often had trouble sleeping and even reached out to Benny-Lynn via text message, hoping to get a response. She expressed that Joy had left their family after the deaths of Benny-Lynn and Jellica, and insisted that Andrew be held accountable for his actions. Soon after the tragedy, Benny-Lynn's family faced another hardship. On June 7, 2021, a fire destroyed their home in the Philippines, leaving them homeless. This tragedy occurred just days before Benny-Lynn and Jellica's ashes were to be returned to them. The family has struggled to cope with their loss, and Father Benny-Lynn mentioned that they are currently relying on the kindness of local residents. When police reviewed the initial online conversations between Andrew and Benny-Lynn, they discovered that he had asked her for private photos, but she had refused. Despite this, their relationship continued, and they made plans to meet. When police examined Andrew's search history, they found that 3 days before meeting Benny-Lynn, he had searched for information about the use and storage of weapons. Andrew then invited Benny-Lynn to his home. During questioning, Andrew recounted the events that occurred between February 20 and March 5th. He mentioned that he had purchased a hammer when he stopped to get gas. On that fateful morning, when he returned home, Andrew found Benny-Lynn in the kitchen where she was preparing dinner. He explained that Benny-Lynn resembled his ex-wife, who was now living in Japan. This resemblance triggered memories of how his wife had treated him unfairly, causing his anger to rise. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Andrew resorted to violence. He first picked up a hammer to attack Benny-Lynn, but quickly realized that it was ineffective. Remembering a samurai sword he had always admired, he decided to use it instead. During questioning, he claimed that Benny-Lynn had taken his hammer and chased him for a while. Their struggle moved from the kitchen to the living room, where Benny-Lynn was eventually attacked with both a sword and a knife. During questioning, Andrew explained that after several days without Benny-Lynn, Jellica began crying for her mother. He was unable to calm the crying child and did not want to care for her, which led him to kill her and hide her body alongside Benny Lynn's. To conceal the crime, he placed the bodies in plastic bin bags, wrapped their heads in blankets and tarpaulins, and buried them under the kitchen floor. On February 2, 2023, 2 years after the murder, Andrew Innes was remanded in custody as the trial began at a high court in Edinburgh. Benny Lynn's family had traveled from the Philippines to attend. Andrew Innes admitted to causing the deaths of Benny Lynn Burke and her daughter Jellica at his home in Dundee, but denied intentionally killing them. The chief inspector described Andrew as cold and callous, stressing that he showed no remorse for his actions. After being questioned by the inspector, Andrew appeared very distressed and began to cry. He claimed that a fight had broken out that day and that he had acted in self-defense, leading to Benny Lynn's death. He insisted that he had not started the fight and that during the struggle, Benny Lynn had picked up a sushi knife and attacked him. He claimed that if he had planned the act in advance, he would have done it more tactfully and discreetly. On the third day of the trial, Andrew took the stand but gave inconsistent testimony. During cross-examination by the defense attorney, he was asked why he killed Benny Lynn. He claimed that he was insane due to steroid use. As the trial progressed, more shocking details came to light. The courtroom eagerly awaited the forensic expert's testimony, hoping for new revelations. It was revealed that DNA belonging to Benny Lynn was found on Andrew's clothing, and a condom containing DNA from both Andrew and Benny Lynn was found in the trash. A girl then testified about her daily experiences in Andrew's home, describing the use of handcuffs. She alleged that Andrew even paid her after committing his despicable act. Unfortunately, her identity and how she arrived at Andrew's home remain unclear. On February 6, 2023, the judge sought evidence from the defense regarding the psychosis Andrew claimed to have, but found none. The jury quickly returned a verdict. Andrew Innes was convicted of double murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 36 years. Although justice had been served, the horrific nature of the crime would haunt people's memories for a long time. The case of Misty Morse. On July 23, 2000, a former judge was walking on Merritt Island, Florida, checking on his boat at the dock. While admiring his boat, he noticed something suspicious in the water. When he bent down to investigate, he smelled a very unpleasant odor. This was not the first time he had encountered dead sea creatures, so he assumed it might be an animal carcass. He contacted a special service to remove the object from the water. However, when experts arrived, they quickly realized the situation was much more serious. It was the body of a girl. The police were called to the scene. Since the body was in the water, it was important to recover it promptly and carefully to avoid losing evidence. The longer the body remained submerged, the more evidence would be washed away. To assist in this, a dive team was deployed. They entered the water with a special bag designed to retrieve the body. This device removes water and wraps tightly around the body, ensuring that as much evidence as possible is preserved. The police observed that the victim was not in the final stages of decomposition. The unidentified girl had been in the river for several days and was found in a state of her hands and feet were tied with rope, and her entire body, especially her head, was covered with several layers of tape. It appeared that the perpetrator had tried to silence the girl, as her face was tightly wrapped, covering her mouth, eyes, nose, and ears. This suggested a deliberate attempt to prevent her from surviving the attack. Identifying the victim was difficult because there were no personal belongings or identification on the body. The police quickly began a murder investigation. It was clear that she had likely been tortured for a long time and possibly abused. To fully understand the circumstances surrounding the victim's death, a thorough analysis was required. This process began with collecting the victim's fingerprints, which were taken by a specialist who accompanied the police to the crime scene. This information was expected to aid in identifying the body. The police faced a major challenge because water can easily wash away evidence, such as DNA and fingerprints. After several days in the river, there might not be any useful evidence left for investigation. Additionally, the heat significantly accelerated the decomposition process, so the body was quickly taken to the laboratory for further examination. Forensic scientists began examining the physical evidence found at the crime scene, focusing on a rope and a black rubber band used to secure garbage bags around the victim's legs. The bags were severely damaged, and forensic experts believe they were originally used to weigh down the body and prevent it from floating. It is possible that rocks or other heavy objects were placed inside the bags to keep the victim submerged. However, the current caused the bags to tear open due to a sharp rock, spilling their contents. The body eventually floated to the surface. The police particularly focused on several pieces of duct tape that were also found at the scene. The sticky side of the tape could contain evidence, as attackers often leave fingerprints and skin particles on it, especially at the ends where the tape is torn from the roll. This evidence could potentially lead to a suspect. However, the police were unable to find enough material on the pieces of duct tape. After careful analysis, they determined that some of the black hairs that had been glued together did not belong to the victim, who had chestnut hair. This suggested that the hairs belonged to someone else. The police sent the hairs for further analysis, but unfortunately, they did not provide any useful information. With the technology available in 2000, all hope now rested on an autopsy. Unfortunately, the water had washed away most of the evidence, and the autopsy revealed that the body was too decomposed to determine the cause of death. Although no traces of male bodily fluids were found on the body, this did not rule out the possibility that the victim had been abused. After analyzing all the gathered information, the police came to a conclusion. The body showed no signs of serious injury. It is believed that the victim may have died from asphyxiation due to the tape covering her mouth and nose, or from strangulation before being dumped in the river. Although there was water in her lungs and stomach, this did not mean that she had drowned. Instead, the prolonged time in the river had naturally filled her body with water. The forensic expert identified the victim through her fingerprints. She was Misty Morse, 22 years old. Her relatives described her as cheerful, friendly, and sociable. Misty enjoyed spending time with friends and attending parties, which was normal for her age. However, she stayed away from bad influences and had no connections to the criminal world or illegal drugs. Instead, she focused on her future. When she was not with her friends, she dedicated her time to preparing for college. Misty was very serious about her studies. On July 24, 2000, police arrived at Misty's family home in Indian Harbor Beach, Florida. They were greeted by her mother, Linda Morse, who was in shock at the heartbreaking news of her daughter Misty's death. Stunned, Linda turned to her husband, the girl's biological father. She desperately wanted to know who might have harmed her daughter, but the police had no leads to share. Instead, they explained that they had come not only to inform her of the death, but also to look for any information that might help identify a potential suspect. In her state of shock, Linda found it difficult to concentrate. However, the police asked her for any information about Misty's last known whereabouts. Linda recalled that 4 days earlier, on July 20, 2000, Misty had returned home in a state of great excitement. After showering, drying her hair, and getting dressed, she was ready to go. As she walked out, she and Linda ran into each other and shared a few jokes. Suddenly, Misty's cell phone rang. She initially ignored the call, but when it rang again, she felt compelled to answer. It seemed that Misty was hiding something. She stepped out of the room to talk briefly with the caller. When she returned, she seemed more serious and said she had to go. Normally, she was very sociable, but that night, she acted secretive. which aroused some suspicion. Misty promised to come back the next day, and she did not send any messages. On July 21, Linda went to work and spent the whole day there. In the evening, Misty still did not return home. Linda didn't think much of it, as Misty often slept over at friends' houses and would be gone for days. However, it was unusual for her not to have made a phone call or sent a text message. By the next morning, Linda was very worried. Misty would normally be gone for a while, but she always let her mother know where she was and never missed her scheduled time to return. Neither her father nor her friends could reach Misty. On July 24, Linda planned to go to the police station that evening to report Misty missing. However, before she could do so, her worst fears came true when the police came to her home to inform her that Misty's body had been found in a nearby river. Linda gave the police permission to search her daughter's room. Everything seemed normal, except for one strange detail. Misty's handbag was on the table. It appeared untouched, containing all of Misty's daily necessities except for her cell phone and driver's license. It was clear that Misty had not intended to be gone for long and planned to return soon. It was also clear that the last person Misty had communicated with was someone she knew well, as they had spoken on the phone shortly before she left. After discussing the situation in detail, Linda and the police decided to check Misty's call logs. Linda's claims were verified through Misty's cell phone logs. She had received 2 calls from an unknown number. Unfortunately, the police were unable to identify the owner of the unknown number, which put them at a standstill. They decided to focus on the limited clues found on Misty's body. The most intriguing clue was a rope with a distinctive red and white pattern, along with duct tape found on Misty's body. After an investigation, it was discovered that this duct tape was part of a specialized set used in sailing. Initially mistaken for ordinary repair tape, this type of tape is actually a special device used to temporarily repair sails while at sea. It is known for its high strength and adhesion and can withstand heavy loads. This information may indicate that the police are looking for someone with sports skills, or perhaps someone who has served in the Navy or worked on ships. The police decided to re-interview Misty's family, suspecting that people who knew Misty might be involved in the case. Misty's mother, Linda, informed the police about her daughter's past relationships, leading them to focus on 2 young men, Teddy Underwood and Bobby Cooper. Both were ex-boyfriends whose relationships with Misty had ended shortly before the tragedy. The investigation revealed that the motive for the murders was likely jealousy. Teddy was particularly notable for his lengthy criminal record, which included multiple cases of abuse and theft, despite his young age. The police then brought Teddy in for questioning. They were surprised to find him to be a friendly, cooperative young man who provided all the necessary information. He also agreed to a DNA test. Teddy explained that he had only met Misty once on the day of her disappearance. He claimed that he did not want to pursue the relationship and that they had broken up amicably. They had met online and communicated for a while before deciding to meet in person to get to know each other better. Despite Teddy's friendly demeanor, the police remained suspicious, believing that he might be trying to deceive them and divert attention from himself. Teddy agreed to let the police search his home, but they found no evidence linking him to the crime. He had no military experience and no interest in the sea. He provided a solid alibi for the entire evening and night of the murder, and he was therefore ruled out as a suspect. The police then began investigating Bobby, the next suspect, because he owned a boat. He appeared to be knowledgeable about emergency sail repair tape and a specially woven rope. Bobby had openly expressed his romantic feelings for Misty, which raised suspicions since he had tried to pursue her before the murder. He was devastated when he learned of Misty's death. The young man cooperated with the police, allowing them to search his home and passing all required tests. He had no criminal record, no history of drug use, and no addiction problems. Overall, Bobby seemed like a nice guy. During questioning, he showed strong emotions and appeared genuinely nervous, which made the police more inclined to believe him. However, things changed when the police discovered Misty's driver's license in Bobby's house. Bobby later added to his story, claiming that he had been in contact with Misty for a long time. He said that she had visited him several times and had left her license during one of her visits. Despite this, he remained a suspect. Surprisingly, at the end of the interview, Bobby recalled Misty's ex-boyfriend. Before the murder, Misty had mentioned a man who surprised Bobby because she described this man as a Special Forces soldier from the Navy. Bobby did not remember his name, but this detail piqued the police's interest, prompting them to investigate further. Linda recalled that one of her daughter's ex-boyfriends was a man named Brent Huck, a former military man. Brent and Misty had been together for a long time. Linda did not approve of their relationship, as she found Brent to be too rude. Her daughter often complained about him, saying that he was aggressive and sometimes violent in his attempts to assert control. Eventually, they broke up. Linda did not initially mention Brent because it had been over a year since they broke up. She believed that they had not seen each other or communicated since then, but she was wrong. The police ran Brent Huck through the database and found some disturbing details. First, his background as a ship captain at the time of Misty's murder raised suspicion. He lived on the island near where Misty's body was discovered. He apparently had access to special marine equipment and the skills needed to operate it, making him a potential suspect. Brent was subsequently arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, he seemed willing to cooperate, but he was clearly nervous and stressed. He was also very wary of the police. Additionally, Brent showed an unusual lack of emotion when informed of Misty's death. He seemed completely unaffected by her passing. The police discovered that the couple continued to see each other as friends, even though those around them thought they had broken up. In fact, they had been seeing each other regularly, up until the day Misty died. During the police interview, Brent's behavior was unusual compared to previous suspects. As the interview progressed, he became increasingly critical of his ex-girlfriend Misty, describing her as immoral and speaking ill of her character. Near the end of the interview, Brent revealed that he had called Misty several times on the night of her disappearance and admitted that they were still in a relationship. The police continued to work with Brent, trying to gather useful information. He seemed to know a lot about Misty's social life, including who she spent time with and what she did with other people. The police were particularly interested in the timing of his phone calls on the night of the murder. Brent claimed that a friend had told him that Misty had spread rumors about being pregnant and that he was the father. He called her to ask her to stop spreading the rumors, expressing concern that it might jeopardize his current relationship. Brent claimed that he did not see Misty in person that night. He only spoke to her on the phone. During the first long call, they talked about many topics, while in the second short call, he confirmed that everything was clear and that Misty understood him. The police doubted his testimony because the autopsy showed no evidence of pregnancy. However, they acknowledged their ongoing intimate relationship, which created a strong motive. Brent denied any involvement in the case and maintained his innocence. During questioning, he had noticeable scratches on his hands, possibly from a struggle with Misty. When questioned by the police, Brent explained that his dog had pulled him while he was skateboarding, causing him to fall and sustain scratches. The police obtained a search warrant for Brent's home. They discovered significant evidence there, including garbage bags identical to those found at the scene with Misty. In the garage, they found black rubber bands that matched the type of straps used to secure the bags on Misty's feet, along with duct tape and a rope with a specific weave that matched the material used to bind Misty. This evidence linked Brent to the case, and they then contacted the prosecutor's office. The district attorney deemed the evidence insufficient to prosecute, stating that they needed more information and confirmation of Brent's guilt beyond circumstantial evidence. Unfortunately, no new leads emerged for a long time. The police felt helpless as the murder suspect continued to live freely. Misty's family was devastated, convinced of Brent's guilt. Although he was under investigation, progress had stalled for weeks. After Misty's death, details of the case were leaked to the media, and her family hoped that public interest would reignite the investigation. Despite the media attention, there was still no progress. A year had passed since the case, but nothing had changed. During this time, Misty's parents pressured the police to seek justice. Meanwhile, the police continued to pursue every small clue, even when the case seemed to have reached a dead end. However, they were determined not to give up. In the fall of 2002, surprising information emerged from a genetics lab in Davis, California. However, it was not what the police expected. They discovered that the black hairs found on the tape from Misty's body were not human. They belonged to a dog. This reminded the police of a black dog at Brent's house. The police began to wonder if it was possible to identify animals by their fur, which had been done in a previous case. Further analysis revealed that Brent's dog had the same type of fur as the one found on the tape. The dog was a unique cross between a Rottweiler and a German Shepherd. This finding was more than just a coincidence. It represented a major breakthrough. The police now felt they had enough evidence to file charges. On October 23, 2002, Brent was arrested for the murder of Misty Morse. He maintained his innocence, claiming that he could not have committed such a heinous act. The prosecution argued that Brent's motive was his fear that Misty might become pregnant, which he believed could jeopardize his relationship with another girlfriend he loved dearly. They presented extensive circumstantial evidence, including dog hair analysis, that implicated Brent-related. Brent's attorney argued that the case against him was a complete fabrication, asserting that there was no credible evidence pointing to him as the perpetrator. The defense attempted to discredit Misty by highlighting her past, which angered her family, who believed she was a good person and did not deserve this tragedy. Brent's defense team also claimed that the medical examiner was unable to conclusively determine Misty's cause of death. Additionally, there was no weapon or witness to link Brent to the crime, but despite their efforts, the defense was unsuccessful in proving his innocence. In May 2003, a jury convicted Brent Huck of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and all of his appeals were denied. Brent is currently serving his sentence in a correctional facility in Florida. Although there is a clear connection between him and the crime, the motive remains unclear. Brent has never admitted guilt or shown remorse, and maintains that he had nothing to do with the murder. The case of Ryan Waller. Heather Kwan plans to celebrate her 21st birthday with her boyfriend, Ryan Waller, and then visit his parents. Ryan is a charming young man who plays the guitar very well. Although he has moved out of his parents' house, he still maintains a good relationship with his family. Heather recently moved into Ryan's apartment in his neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. She is very excited to be living with her boyfriend. The couple has a strong relationship, and although they seem to have different views on life, Heather has graduated from high school and enrolled in college to study law. According to friends and family, she is a kind and compassionate person who always tries to help and support those around her. In contrast, Ryan has a more serious attitude and is focused on his future. He also attends the same college as Heather. Despite their differences, they seem to complement each other very well, and their opposing views do not lead to conflict. The couple's life together is going well. They had been living together for a month and a half. On December 25, 2006, everything was prepared at Ryan's family home for dinner. However, Heather and Ryan were missing. They did not arrive on time, which worried Ryan's family because it was unusual for them to be late. Initially, the family waited for a while before starting the festive dinner without the couple. They assumed that Heather and Ryan were just enjoying their time together and had lost track of time. As time passed and the couple still had not arrived, Ryan's family started calling his cell phone, but he did not answer. This day was very important to them. They knew that Ryan and his girlfriend would never miss the festive dinner, not only for Heather's birthday, but also for Christmas. Although Ryan's parents had already started eating, they decided to postpone the meal because they were worried. Ryan's sister said she went to younger brother's apartment earlier in the day, but no one answered the door. At the time, she thought it was normal and assumed the couple had just gone out. However, she now felt suspicious. The family had not seen the couple for 2 days. Concerned, Ryan's mother went to the police station to request a welfare check on Ryan and Heather. However, the police were busy that evening due to an increase in calls, which often happens around the holidays. Since the initial concern seemed minor, the officers did not consider the request urgent, and the family had to wait. The police finally arrived at the couple's apartment a few hours later. By then, Ryan's parents were extremely worried. His father had been waiting for the police near the apartment complex and became even more concerned when his son did not answer the phone or respond to knocks on the door. Heather did not answer either. After several unsuccessful knocks, the officers had no choice but to break down the door. Once inside, they found Ryan in the living room, suffering from severe facial injuries. Fortunately, he was still alive. He appeared to be in shock, unable to move much or answer the officers' questions clearly. When asked about the girl, Ryan said she was sleeping in another room. However, when the officers checked, they found her dead on the couch. She had injuries similar to Ryan's, indicating that she had been beaten. Most of the blows were directed at her face, causing abrasions, bleeding, and open wounds. Her cause of death was determined to be due to gunfire. Police quickly suspected Ryan's involvement in the incident for several reasons. First, he was the only person found alive in the apartment. Second, he appeared to have escaped serious injury, unlike his girlfriend. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry. Ryan was speaking strangely, which made the officers suspicious of him. They decided that he did not require medical attention and placed him in a patrol car while they continued to investigate the crime scene. Ryan was the prime suspect from the start. Tragically, Heather was dead. She had been dead for about a day. He had apparently spent several hours in the house next to Heather's body. Ryan claimed that he did not remember anything. The police thought that Ryan might have tried to cover up the crime. Initially, Ryan was put in a patrol car, where he sat for about 4 to 5 hours. Later that morning, he was taken to the police station and questioned. At the station, all of Ryan's clothes were taken for laboratory analysis, and he was given a thin cotton suit. He was officially informed that he was a suspect in the murder. From the beginning, Ryan spoke to police officer Paul Dalton, who dismissed the possibility that Ryan might have been seriously injured. Ryan was never examined by a doctor. Instead, he was taken to an interrogation room and left alone. Ryan seemed confused about the situation. For the first few minutes, he mumbled incomprehensibly to himself, as recorded by the camera, but his words were inaudible. After about half an agonizing hour, the police finally entered the room to begin questioning. Ryan was informed of his rights and asked if he understood why he was there. He replied that he knew nothing, that he wanted to sleep, and that he had a bad headache. Paul immediately began pressuring Ryan. He insisted that he did not know what had happened in his apartment. The recording shows that he sounded tired and unwell, struggling to form coherent sentences. In order to defend himself psychologically, he had previously curled up in a corner, hugging his knees to his chest like a frightened child. He repeatedly expressed his desire to go home. However, Paul had other intentions. He wanted to extract a confession regarding the murder. As the interrogation continued, Ryan's behavior became increasingly erratic. He even forgot his girlfriend's name and could not answer the question, no matter how hard he tried. He had difficulty pronouncing her name correctly, and at one point confused it with a nickname. He also misremembered her age, insisting she was 16 or 17, even though she was actually 21. When Officer Paul asked Ryan about the black eye, he spent a long time thinking, but could not remember what had happened. He eventually suggested that he had gotten into a fight with his girlfriend and that she had hit him. This explanation could have been influenced by Ryan's injuries or condition. However, Officer Paul found this story unconvincing and suspected that Ryan was trying to deceive him. Ryan then forgot his girlfriend's name again. He began telling the police that either Christina or Alicia had attacked him. Given his strange reactions, it was clear that something was wrong. Ryan struggled to form sentences and had significant gaps in his memory. However, Officer Paul dismissed these issues, believing that Ryan had only been hit in the face and had not suffered any serious injuries. Paul disregarded Ryan's behavior during the interrogation and suspected that he was trying to mislead the investigation. Meanwhile, the recording shows Ryan repeatedly saying that he wanted to go home, that he was tired, and that he needed to sleep. It seemed that he did not fully understand the situation, but he was not allowed to lie down and rest. No one would let him leave. Eventually, Ryan began to recall events differently. He started recounting the robbery, stating that his girlfriend had died and mentioning a young man named Richie Carver and his father, Larry Carver, who had lived there before Heather moved in. According to Ryan, a group of criminals had started attacking after breaking into the house. Ryan's story changed dramatically when he insisted that Richie had attacked him. Although Ryan was confused about the situation, he remembered that Richie had come to the house to take some belongings. Initially, Ryan did not remember what weapons the intruders had used, but he later stated that they had 2 handguns. In a surprising turn of events, Ryan gave the police an unexpected statement. He claimed that they had attacked both Heather and him, explaining that the bruises on his face were caused by the handguns. Ryan's behavior in the interrogation room may have been due to the severity of the injuries he had sustained, which could have put him in a dangerous situation. Ryan's memory gaps and constant urge to lie down or leave were understandable given his condition. If Ryan had been telling the truth, the bullet would still be lodged in his head, and he would have suffered internal bleeding and possibly died. However, Officer Paul found this explanation unconvincing. Paul chose to focus on the fact that Ryan had changed his story several times. To Paul, this indicated that Ryan was lying, which only added to his suspicions. As a result, the interrogation continued. Despite Ryan's condition and behavior, Paul did not believe anything he said. Paul thought that if Ryan had really been shot in the eye, he would not be alive to talk to him. He would be dead, like Heather. It was clear that Ryan was exhibiting a range of symptoms. The police should have recognized this, as all police officers are trained to identify such problems. Recognizing a traumatic brain injury is not difficult, especially when the signs are so obvious. However, Paul refused to acknowledge the situation. He believed that Ryan was trying to trick him and insisted that Ryan continue to answer his questions, stating that Ryan would not be allowed to go home or sleep. Paul tried to piece together what had happened, clarifying the details and identifying any inconsistencies that might support his suspicions. He kept asking Ryan questions. Ryan tried to explain who the attackers shot first, whether he had called the emergency services, why he had not been able to contact rescuers, and why he had not answered his parents' calls or opened the door for his father. However, Ryan was struggling with a brain hemorrhage that was worsening his condition. Despite not being able to remember even what he had eaten for breakfast, the interrogation continued. Ryan realized what was happening and understood that he was in a dangerous situation. He tried to convince the police officer, Paul, that he was telling the truth. In a last desperate attempt, Ryan approached the police officer and looked him straight in the eye. At that moment, Paul noticed that Ryan was injured by a gunshot. However, Paul did not take the situation seriously and did not assist Ryan go out. Ryan continued to walk to the exit by himself, leaning against the wall despite having a bullet in his head. Eventually, paramedics arrived and loaded him onto a stretcher to take him to the hospital. When they arrived, the doctors quickly assessed Ryan's condition and realized that it had worsened significantly due to the delay caused by the police. Ryan should have received medical attention as soon as he was found in the apartment, which had been at least 7-8 hours prior. The doctors discovered a bullet lodged in his head, and he was bleeding profusely, but Ryan could no longer undergo surgery due to a brain infection. The bullet could only be removed from Ryan's skull after 3 days because it was not safe to operate earlier. During this time, Ryan experienced pain and cognitive problems. He finally had surgery on December 28, but his recovery took more than a month, during which he was hospitalized. Unfortunately, the bullet and the police's mistakes caused severe and irreversible brain damage, especially in the infected area. As a result, Ryan's left eye stopped functioning and could not be saved. The most concerning issue was the seizures that neurosurgeons discovered during his recovery, which will affect him for the rest of his life. Neurosurgeons believed that if the police had taken him to the hospital immediately, the severity of the injury could have been significantly reduced, and some of the problems could have been avoided altogether. Now, he must live with the consequences of this tragedy. Doctors discovered that Ryan had a broken jaw, which the medical team attributed to the police. This injury may have worsened Ryan's already serious condition due to the bullet in his head. The medical team that operated on Ryan and monitored his recovery noted that the police's actions had significantly contributed to his injuries. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation. Paul Dalton recognized his previous mistakes and was committed to uncovering the truth about the crime. He tried to shed light on the case involving Heather and Ryan. The police investigated the events that led to the tragic incident. On that day, Ryan and Heather had spent the day at home, ordering pizza, and everything seemed normal, like any other day. Neighbors reported that after the pizza was delivered, Richie, who had previously lived with Ryan, arrived. An argument ensued between Richie and Ryan, after which Richie left. According to Ryan's neighbors, the couple were good-natured individuals with no criminal records, mental health issues, or harmful addictions, and they lived a quiet and stable life. Richie, on the other hand, had a reputation in the criminal world and had faced numerous prosecutions for various crimes, although he had not been involved in violent crimes. Police suspected Richie was responsible for the attack. Ryan mentioned Richie's name during questioning, suggesting that the attack may have been motivated by revenge. Although Ryan's memories remained unclear, they provided valuable information that helped the police piece together the events leading up to Heather's death. Ryan Waller was no longer considered a suspect. Instead, he was recognized as a witness and victim of a crime that he had survived. The location of the house at the end of a cul-de-sac made it isolated. Ryan struggled to remember the entire sequence of events due to his memory problems. He mentioned Richie, but the suspect denied any wrongdoing. The police stated that no evidence linking Richie to the incident was found at the scene. The motive behind the crime remains unclear. Ryan and Heather did not possess any valuables that could attract a robber to target them. It will take time to piece together what happened. Neurosurgeons believe that Ryan is still in rehabilitation even after being discharged from the hospital a month ago. Therefore, it is hoped that he can contribute to the investigation by remembering some details. After some time, when Ryan's condition improved slightly, he recalled that on December 24, he and Heather woke up in their apartment in the morning. It was a normal day for them before the Christmas holidays, and everyone was happy. Additionally, the couple had planned to visit Ryan's relatives to celebrate Heather's birthday and Christmas. Ryan remembered that in the morning, he and his girlfriend Heather were in the kitchen when they heard a knock on the door. Ryan went to the door to check who it was. When he opened the door, he saw Richie Carver and Richie's father, Larry, both armed. Ryan tried to close the door quickly, but they attacked him before he could react, knocking him unconscious. Richie and Larry then moved into the next room, where Heather was sitting on the couch. They attacked her, killed her, and stole several valuables and a computer from the apartment. Ryan recalled that Richie had always been very jealous of him, and they often argued. Eventually, Ryan suggested that Richie move out to get away from his annoying neighbor and strengthen his relationship with Heather. This angered Richie, leading to a conflict between him and Ryan. The police were unable to determine the exact motive behind the attack, but Ryan's account of the incident seemed credible. Only the perpetrators could confirm the details. The official explanation was that it was a robbery, as several items, including a computer, were stolen from the house. Surprisingly, it was revealed that Larry, the attacker's biological father, was also involved as an accomplice. Although they were apparently committing a robbery, the main motive seemed to be revenge, as several witnesses reported that Richie frequently visited his old home. It was concluded that Heather died instantly during the attack. It is likely that the criminals killed her because she was an unwanted witness. Ryan, on the other hand, was luckier. The bullet did not penetrate deeply into his brain, so he was only unconscious. The criminals probably believed he was dead and left the scene without attempting to finish him off. They quickly took whatever valuables they could find, and the entire ordeal lasted only a few minutes. Ryan was unconscious for several hours, and when he finally woke up, his brain was damaged, leaving him unaware of his surroundings. He mistakenly thought that Heather was just sleeping on the couch and didn't want to disturb her. So he went to bed and spent most of the time sleeping, unaware of the tragedy that had occurred. After the incident, Richie and Larry suspected that Ryan had survived the attack, but the police kept this information secret to protect him. Richie and Larry were eventually arrested and found to be in possession of several items stolen from Ryan's apartment, as well as 2 murder weapons. Experts later determined that the shots that wounded Ryan and Heather had been fired by Richie. Richie Carver faced charges including murder, burglary, and unlawful use of a weapon, which resulted in a sentence of life in prison without parole. His father was also convicted. Initially, Larry's wife claimed that he had confessed to her, but she later decided not to testify for the prosecution out of fear. Fortunately, Larry's mother bravely testified against him. The prosecutor's office presented a substantial amount of evidence, leading to a jury convicting Larry Carver of first-degree murder and robbery, resulting in a sentence of life in prison without parole. Years after the murderers were convicted, Ryan's father sued the Phoenix Police Department. He had watched his only son suffer from years of pain after the attack and felt frustrated with the way the police handled the case. Ryan experienced seizures, cognitive impairment, and constant headaches. Ryan's father accused police officer Paul Dalton of falsifying evidence and distorting details of the case, which Paul attempted to refute. As it turned out, Paul had a history of controversy and often failed to follow proper procedures. Ryan died 10 years later from a seizure that caused him to fall and sustain a fatal head injury. The tragic event attracted significant media attention. However, Ryan's parents chose to stay away from reporters. His father gave only one interview, in which he shared his efforts to seek justice for his son